So it is early October on the Nights On Lights Off podcast, but something different today. The lights are on, the night is off. We are recording during the day, scheduling a little bit crazy, but this is Will of the Game Escape channel, joined as always by JayShy of ShinMegamiTalks. Jay, how you doing today?
Today is good. Bit winded, as you know. I invited my second son into the family, so having some sleepless nights there. But I'm trying to game here and there, you know.
You've got to. I mean, you had initially said that the fall was going to be a time of epic deliveries, and you weren't wrong.
Yeah. My son came a bit early. He wasn't supposed to arrive until next week, but he came 2 weeks early. So it's funny. He's born on my father's birthday, so that's hilarious.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. Um, Other than that, it's just, the usual of sleepless nights and trying to squeeze in what little games I can.
Well, he came before all of your pre-orders.
uh yeah, he actually came in between. No, you're right, he did. He came before some pre-orders that I had pre-ordered. There's one that I said I was going to talk about. And should we just dive into that one really quick?
I I think we should because I know there was a game that was highly anticipated here on the podcast on our Discord, and I think that's the one you're talking about, and you had
Yep.
some interesting thoughts. So yeah, let's dive into that.
So the game that we are discussing is Reynatis by Nipponichi Software. Well, it was published by Nipponichi Software, but it was developed by Furyu. I like Furyu games. I know a lot of people don't. They find them boring and dull. But Reynatis, it was high on, I guess, my totem pole of releases to come out. It looked like it had fun combat. The game was going to be really really fun. And by my surprise, the game was very disappointing at the start. Uh, it was the most disappointing thing I've ever played in a long time because I was really really hyped for this game. But as I played the game and I put roughly about 10 hours into the game, that kind of changed, which was weird. Um, the game is still somewhat kind of lacking in some areas, but once I figured out what it was, I wasn't disappointed anymore as much as I was in the beginning. Have you ever played a game called Akiba's Trip? Have you ever played that?
Yes, yes.
All right. So before I wanted to discuss it on the podcast, I was trying to think to myself. I was like, why is this game's structure so bad? The game is structured really really horribly. And in terms of what I mean by that is like the game design is you basically running from waypoint to waypoint. It's really dull. It's just you running through Shibuya, and you run from one waypoint, you talk to a person, then you run to another waypoint, you talk to a person, you run to another waypoint, you just talk to a person. But the more I kept playing it and figuring the game's like mechanics, I wouldn't say mechanics, like what it's trying to pitch to me, it plays exactly like Akiba's Trip. The thing is that I like Akiba's Trip. Um, the problem with Renatus is that it doesn't have the charm that Akiba's Trip has. Akiba's Trip has a charm to it where you can go and you can shop and you can basically be an otaku in game form is what you can do. You can buy things that equip to your body, stupid clothing, anime t-shirts. You can basically be the ultimate otaku and you basically fight vampires in the daytime in the middle of Akiba. This game does that exact same thing. The problem is that it takes itself too serious. So it kind of like it doesn't like I said, it doesn't have that charm, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I Akiba's Trip was a game that I wanted to like, but I
Uh-huh.
did find playing it very tedious because of you said that, the waypoint structure, and then also I
Yeah.
remember getting it on the PlayStation 3, and just the load times from area to area of the game were so egregious
Yeah.
that after a while it just turned me off. And even on PC, when I got it much later, I still found that for whatever reason the load times were pretty bad. So I definitely see what you mean about that.
Yeah. So the thing with Renatus, what I figured out is when you so I had a different notion in my head of what Reynatis was going to be. I thought it was going to be, kind of like a Kingdom Hearts kind of game, or maybe just a combat heavy game like Bayonetta or something like that. Because me personally, I like the combat in this game. The combat is really fun, but the game is heavy on RPG. But it's more or less kind of like that RPG where you actually play a role. And the thing is that the trailer doesn't really tell you that. It kind of just shows you combat stuff. But once you figure out that the game is, hey, you're basically playing the role of this police officer, or you're playing the role of this wizard. You basically go from place to place and you talk to people. And there are aspects of the game where you can go to shops like restaurants and you can buy, food here and there. You can still do the role playing thing, but the game doesn't tell you that in the trailers. So it kind of threw me off. But once I figured out what it was, I was kind of like, oh, it's just a very, it's taking itself too serious version of Oculus Trip. Once I figured that out, I kept playing the game. Like, but I think I might have like a bad addiction to just very bad games. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I want to give it a shot. I've been too busy with some other games to jump into it, but I at least visually I thought it had an interesting aesthetic. I'm a sucker for like modern day Tokyo, Shibuya, that sort of thing. So I will fire it up.
Yeah. The best advice I can give you is when you're playing the game, it sucks to say this, but try to keep an open mind. That's the best thing I can give you. The best advice I can give you, is when you're playing the game, make sure you have more than an hour. I would say that because it's hard to play this game in an hour and try to speed run through all of the talking points to get to the combat to see what the combat's like. Because it takes a minute to get to the combat, where it gets fleshed out and you start getting party members. Because the combat, I don't know if you ever played Onichambara Chaos Z on PS4, where there's an interesting mechanic is as you're fighting, you can link combos to your other party members by swapping them in and out. Um, the thing that makes Renatus kind of cool in terms of combat is when you're fighting with one character, you can swap out your other character. And I expected the character to disappear from the field when I did that, but the character stays on the field and fights alongside you as you're
Oh,
swapping different characters. It's really cool. It has a neat mechanic. So I would give it that. The combat is kind of fun. It just takes a while to get to that stuff.
interesting. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I I can't promise that I'm going to be popping it in the next 2 or 3 weeks because I'm just so absorbed in some other games, but
Yeah,
I will
same.
give it a shot.
Same. What I mean, even with the game I spoke to you guys about in the chat that I recently started playing, it has completely taken me away from Renatus. Um, I don't know if you saw it in the chat, but I actually started playing a game called BatBoy as well.
I did see it. I didn't get a chance to like look at some gameplay videos. So what's that one
So
about?
so so BatBoy is amazing. It's really good. Unfortunately, it's a limited run release. I hate to admit that.
Oh,
But yeah, I'm so sorry. When I saw the gameplay, I couldn't pass this one up. So there was something about it that just screamed gem to me. So I did pre-order Batboy. Batboy is basically your old school. It looks very 8-bit ish, Mega Man like kind of game, but it has a different kind of mechanic. So like in Mega Man, you shoot the little pellets, but if you hold a button, he would charge up his shot and he'll have a more powerful shot. This game does that exact same thing, but a different form. So Batboy has a bat that he can charge up and he throws it and it spins in place. But as it spins in place, it doesn't repel back to you unless you press the shoot button again. So it kind of works like Captain America's shield, but it spins in place in certain areas. But what makes the charge bat interesting is that as it spins in place, you can use it as a catapult. So you can jump on it as it's spinning, and it launches you upward to reach different areas that you can't reach.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really fun. You start getting different mechanics for every boss you beat. So I just got the grappling hook or this weird bat charge. It's really good. I definitely recommend this game.
Okay. BatBoy.
Yeah,
I don't know.
if you can find one pretty cheap, physical, just grab it. It's good.
Yeah, I'm going to look for it on eBay because I cannot give money to
Limited
Limited
Run.
Run.
Yeah, I gave Limited Run my $60. Well, no, I think it was like $40 or something like that. Oh, and it's a pure cart, so that's a plus.
Okay. Well, at least it's not like a download code in a
No,
box.
no, it's a pure cart, so that's a plus. The fact I was really scared about that. I was really hoping that it was a pure cart for sure.
Sweet, sweet. So you
Yep.
got those two games, and I think that's pretty impressive. That in in between the newborn,
Yep.
sleepless nights, and the stress that you found time to play those.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I also got one retro game too. So I've been keeping my eye on PlayStation 3 because I feel like there's like this there's this weird bounce back between PlayStation 3 games and PS4 games. But there's a game in particular that I've been keeping my eye on just in case. And it was Ridge Racer 7. Um I recently picked that up online because the game just looked very arcadey. And man, Ridge Racer 7 is great. It's so much fun. It's like playing Ridge Racer meets what's that game where you it's a Sega racer where you drive in like a red Lamborghini and there's a girl sitting in the passenger seat and a dude, and if you
Oh,
press R,
Outrun.
Outrun. It kind of reminds, it kind of plays like that, but in a more Gran Turismo kind of feel, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I actually purchased that maybe 2 years ago,
Uh-huh.
and it's a very unique game because it's a very early PlayStation 3 game,
Yeah.
and it's one of the few that I believe is 1080/60.
What does that
In other words,
mean?
1080p, 60 frames per second.
Ah, see, I don't pay attention to this stuff. I never knew about this.
Yeah,
Well,
well, there was when the PlayStation 3 came out, that was the promise that you were gonna get 1080p gaming, so that's
at
like
60 frames
Blu-ray
per second.
quality and 60 frames per second. There were a couple of those early games, the other one being Virtua Tennis 3, which is the first game I got for the system.
Okay.
And Ridge Racer, I think, is considered to be like the best example of these games, but the PlayStation 3 never really delivered on that past this initial batch of games.
Mm.
So it's a, I think, very collectible game from that standpoint. And and as you've seen, it looks amazing. It runs amazing. I
Yes,
mean,
it does.
compare it to, I mean, actually, Gran Turismo is, I believe, 1080/60, or it's at least 60 frames per second. But there was another one. I think it was called. Man, was it Drive Club? Like, play any racer that's at 30 frames per second,
Mhm.
and you're gonna see this difference.
Yeah, I've seen gameplay of Drive Club. I never played it,
That might be
but
PlayStation 4 though, right? Was that 3 or
yeah,
4?
I think Drive Club is PlayStation 4, if I'm
Okay.
not mistaken. Um, Ridge Racer, yeah, yeah, I think you might be right because even when I'm playing it, it just feels different when I'm playing it. Um, it doesn't feel like any other game I've played on the PlayStation 3. It feels, and even the reflections on the cars is great. Like when I'm looking at it, it just looks good. Even when I'm playing it, it feels good. It feels like what I'm telling the car to do, it does it.
Yeah, I mean, that's that's the responsiveness. That's why I always say, I'm a frame rate person, and I
All right.
feel like you gotta get me to 60. Higher is better, but 60 makes the game look better, feel more responsive, feel more instantaneous. And like I said, for me, when I got the PlayStation 3, I thought I had reached the future. I'm playing Virtua Tennis 3. It's like, oh, this is amazing. Looks great on my new high definition television. I
Mhm.
think Virtua Fighter 5, there was a Virtua Fighter that came out for the PS3. It
Was that the
was
one
either
also on Xbox 360?
yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking
S-
about.
So that that was, I believe, also a 1080 60 game.
Mm.
And then I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is incredible." And then I started buying more games and I'm like, "The system feels slow for whatever reason. Why is this happening?"
Mm.
And then I understood what the difference was between frame rates.
Yeah, I've never really felt the difference in 60 frames per second until I played Ridge Racer. Because now that you're mentioning it, I do notice that the game feels different for sure.
Well, you're going to go we talk about going down the rabbit hole. That is why I double purchase my Switch games on the PC. So
Mm.
like think of, one of your favorite Switch games. I was playing like the Midnight Fight Express. Is that because that's on the Switch, right, as well? I think, or I could be wrong about that. That Humble Bundle game, the
Uh huh.
Midnight Fight, but it could be any
What was it? Yeah, I think you're right. What is it? No, not Midnight Fight Club. But I know what you're talking
Midnight.
about.
Yeah, so it's a great fighting game. Plays buttery smooth on
Hmm.
PC. Totally different, but you could pick any game you want. Download it on Steam. Play it at the higher frame rate. It's almost painful to go back to the Switch.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
still love the Switch, so I'm not saying that it's a bad console. Believe me, I've invested, as we've said here, lots of time and lots of money on the Switch.
I don't want to talk about how much I invested. Please.
I just saw my pre-order bill, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, I did that. I forgot."
Yeah, I was kind of shocked. I wasn't even thinking about my pre-orders. And my son was born, and then all of a sudden I get the alert. It's like, yeah, we're ready for you to make this payment. I was like, oh yeah, that's right.
Well, it's kind of funny, you're spending his college fund before he's out of the hospital and back home.
No one's supposed to know about
Oh, sorry.
that.
Well, hey, by the time he goes to college,
He'll be
they'll solve the
fine.
whole college cost problem.
Yeah, he'll be fine. He'll have plenty of games to play in
Yeah.
college.
Awesome. So, anything else you've been playing?
uh, Mostly, oh, that I've been playing. No, well, that's a lie because Evercade just came out with two new carts. So I did try that Legacy of Kain, was it remaster or whatever you call it?
Okay.
So I have
Yep,
been
I never
playing
played that
that.
game.
Like Legacy of Kain, I've never played until recently. It's a pretty cool game. I've been playing that and oh wait, I have been playing something for a couple. I even wrote an article about it. I've been playing Spawn on the PlayStation 1.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I've been playing that. I've been trying to beat that game. I had to resort to using codes, unfortunately. So, yeah, I got this. I've been playing PlayStation 1 games. Oh, and for anyone who doesn't know, Will and I have started a Substack where you guys can go read some of the articles that we write about video games and being an otaku and times in Japan and collectibles and stuff like that. So I'm sure you can leave that in the description down below, right?
Yes, I will definitely do that.
So yeah, we've been writing interesting articles. Sugemi Importers actually is it's called Sugemi Importers. I actually got that name from a YouTuber, a really good friend of mine named Oricon. So I'm not going to take all the credit for that. That was his idea. Um, so that name just stems from his mind and collectability. We should also get him on the show one day.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. But I've been playing Spawn on the PlayStation 1. I've been trying to play some old stuff and in between I'm playing some new stuff. But time is not on my side right now. I got to squeeze it in where I can.
I could imagine. I can imagine. Yeah, I've been pretty busy. I've had a really great stretch gaming here in the
Mm,
fall, and I played 3 games that have rekindled almost my passion for the hobby. Or maybe rekindled is not the right word because that suggests that I've somehow disconnected, which I certainly haven't, but kind of reinvigorated
mm.
my love of gaming. So I'm going to get to those 3. But I do want to talk about a little piece of hardware that I purchased, and that is the PlayStation 2 MemCard 2 Pro. And this is a little device. It's basically memory card with a little OLED screen. You plug in an SD card, and you have unlimited saves for the PlayStation 2
Wow.
and and PlayStation 1. And then what I did is it creates these virtual cards. So on one of the virtual cards, I put on free McBoot and then was able to run my I'm going to forget the actual name, but the M2 SIO memory card port game loader. So it's basically essentially like an ODE for the PlayStation 2.
Right.
And I talked about that maybe 3, 4 episodes ago. So now this is the perfect combination for PlayStation. Unlimited game saves per game. You put I don't know, a 128 gigabyte card in there. You'll never run out of memory cards. And now you can load up your games using free McBoot, and it's just the perfect combination.
Yeah, I'm gonna need
So,
that ASAP because I've been playing PlayStation 2 games quite a bit, and I noticed that I'm running out of space because
yeah,
I only have 3 memory cards.
I mean it's completely transformative. And it even goes so far as like it's Wi-Fi connected, so you can log into it from your computer or phone, manage all of your card saves. Uh, it's it's just incredible, and so like it allows you to discover games that you wouldn't usually discover. I was playing this game called Urban Rain. I don't know if
I
you've heard of that.
love Urban Rain. I have that game. I love it.
Well,
It's
it's a
like
super rare and expensive.
is it?
Yep.
Oh god, Urban Rain is like Tekken the beat 'em up.
Yes.
It's
That's
so
exactly
good.
what it is.
It's so good.
And the only reason I know about I'd never heard about it, and when I got this MC2 SIO, actually, I got the official one that I'm using, but previously to that, I got a clone from Amazon, and sometimes these clones come pre-installed with stuff, and this game was on there, and I'm like, "Urban Rain, what the heck is that?" But yes, it's like it is a Tekken beat 'em up. It's kinda like those side games or those mini games from Tekken,
Right.
like
Made into a
Tekken.
full game.
Yes.
I have
So
to
that
see. You said this game is rare and expensive. You're joking. I don't
I
believe
was
you.
like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy a copy of it. I need to have a copy of this." And then I was looking on eBay, it was like 110 bucks.
No way.
Yeah.
Let me see. Urban Rain. Because I do have that game.
I
Oh,
am
oh wow. Okay.
extremely jealous of that.
All right. That is there's a copy that's going down. Oh, that's why, because there's not a lot of copies out there.
Yeah, so, like, I'm just looking on the GameEye app, they're saying,
50
C
bucks.
50 bucks CIB,
But
100
I
new.
see $100 brand new. I see one that's complete for 64.99. I see one listing though. Everything else is like loose
Yeah.
or European. Oh, okay, so this game is this game is I would say it's uncommon because there's a lot of there's 84 copies, but a lot of them are European releases. There's not
Yeah.
a lot of North American. Oh wow. Jeez.
Well, it has my recommendation.
Yes, I recommend that game as well. I
I mean,
recommend that
it's
game as well.
Like it's not complicated, but it's one of those games you can just pick up, play. It has a really great just kind of pacing to it. Like you could sit down, you could play 1 or 2 levels in 10,
Hmm.
15 minutes and feel
Yep.
like, hey, I made progress, shut it off, go do something else. Really, really cool.
Really quick, what's the most that you would pay for a complete copy of that game? I'm just curious. What's the most?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I would have to say like under 100 because I saw it for 100. I'm like, no, I can't do that.
Would you do it for 70?
Would I do it for 70? I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe,
All
maybe.
right, I'm gonna send you. I found one for 70. Here, I'm gonna send it to you. It's complete.
Okay.
I'm gonna send it to you, and let's see if you take. He's got pictures up, so yeah.
I
There we
may.
go.
I wonder if.
We are enablers. We should not be doing this.
Well, you want to know how much of enabling we do. So I was looking through my YouTube videos and I saw in July of 2023, I made a video about my Switch collection.
Right.
And the title was My Switch Collection 60 plus games.
Okay.
And then I happened to look at my Switch collection now, so
Mhm.
a little more than a year later. I'm up to 170.
Yep. That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Because
So,
I think I made that exact same video. Um, it was when I started with the Switch. It was 14 games, and 1 year later, I think I made it to about 120, 112, something like that.
yeah, and I was about to say, oh, I hope my wife doesn't listen to this, but turns out she does listen. So,
That sucks.
uh, don't worry, sweetheart. I'll sell them one day and I'll buy you something nice.
Hey, or you can just buy her something nice preemptively, and then buy more games for yourself, so it doesn't hurt as bad.
Well, that is true. But of course, I could uh, not buy her something nice preemptively and put that money towards more Switch games. So that's the dilemma. The promise of nice keeps more money in my pocket. No, that's
Right.
I don't want the
She's gonna hear
listeners
this
to get
now.
yeah, don't want her to get the wrong impression. I do buy nice things. I think you can't let your hobby consume your life, you
I
know.
mean, you can let it
Well,
consume your life in secret.
in secret, yes. It can't overtly like, the people can't be like tripping over games as they come into your house. Then you look like a hoarder, but if it's nicely shelved and away in one room, you're a collector.
I have a friend who does that. Literally keeps the games in the boxes. They're like just scattered. He hasn't opened them yet because he has other games he's playing. He just it's like a store in there.
Is he married?
No, no.
Okay.
He's
Yeah.
dating though. He's dating.
Okay. So I didn't used to do that with games, but before I got married, I definitely like in other closets, I'd have like other collections of things.
Right, right.
I just have like, baseball cards, sports memorabilia, and then when I got married and my wife moved in, she was kind of like, "Where am I going to put my clothes?"
Yeah. Yeah, you gotta make room.
Got to make room. So I no longer have my sports stuff in the house. That is in storage. But yeah, so Urban Rain, Memory Card 2 Pro, high recommendations. I also have been playing the new Legend of Zelda game, Echoes of Wisdom. I'm not going to go into that here because a little bit later on in the episode, you're going to hear me interview someone who works at Grezzo, the company that helped develop it. He's a
Yep.
longtime member of our Discord, Okie Okie Panic, otherwise known as Oscar. So stay tuned for that. We kind of talk about that game. Although I will say, absolutely love it. Very high recommendation. I was playing right as sort of at the end of August, a game named Schim. Are you familiar with Schim?
Is that the one where you play as the little ink block that has to
Yes.
go through all the shadows?
Yes.
Okay. I haven't played it, but my wife wants to play that game really, really bad, and we haven't bought it yet. So, but I do know of its pedigree and how much fun it can be.
Yeah, I pre-ordered it from the I Am 8-Bit store
Uh-huh.
because it looked interesting. It almost had like a cell shaded, almost Earthbound type
Yeah,
aesthetic.
watercolor kind of look, yeah.
And I just said this would be interesting. But then it was on a Steam sale, so I was playing it on Steam on my Steam Deck. You know, the OLED where you have the really really inky blacks, which
Mhm.
is perfect for this game because it all is about shadows and just incredibly creative. Like it's a platformer, but it's almost kind of like relaxing but surreal at the same time.
Right.
And I think it's a special game. It's a game that has a degree of mastery and love and, understanding the medium of games and then doing something completely different with it. Very, very good. I would strongly encourage people to play it.
Okay. See, that just sold me. Now I have to order it.
Yeah, it's like I said, I can't speak to the performance on Switch, but it is a game where I think I'm playing it at full 144 hertz on my PC and 90 on the Steam Deck. So it definitely benefits again because the movement to really have those pastels and inky colors pop, I think is helped by the frame rate. But on the other hand, as a platformer and as a concept, it'll be enjoyable, I think, at any frame rate.
Nice.
So that game, uh, high recommendation. And then I talked about this. I even wrote an article about it. I think I sent you that article about Astro Bot,
You did
and
you didn't. I didn't upload
I
it yet.
didn't.
No,
Oh,
'cause I haven't
shoot.
seen it yet.
Okay, so I'm going to send that to you for the
Yes,
Substack.
so I can put it up and, edit it. Well, not
Yes.
edit it, but put in the little pictures and such and get people that nice, people love looking at pictures as they read.
Yeah, definitely. I think I have some pictures for it, but anyway, it's a game again that has rejuvenated me because we've talked on this podcast a lot about how where gaming is going wrong,
Yeah.
whether it's the greed, whether it's the ideology, the laziness. Astrobot, of course, coming out at a time when Sony is not exactly doing well in the court
No.
of public opinion,
Yeah.
but this game is one of the greatest platformers I've ever played.
Well,
It
I've I've
is
I've I've found out some information about that game too. You're gonna be really surprised by this. You would not believe
okay.
who actually worked on that game. Do you know who worked on that game? It's
I did.
I think it's Sony Tokyo. What is that? What's
Team Asobi.
Yeah, those are isn't that the same guys that worked on uh what's it called? It because I heard they even took some of the developers that worked on games like I Am Setsuna, um, and all of those Tokyo RPG games, and
Interesting.
some other developers from uh what is it called? Japan something. It's a Studio Japan. They used to make a bunch of games for Sony back in the day. And
Yes.
they're basically all in one developmental studio now, and they're the ones who worked on that game. Once I found that out, I was like, of course this game is great.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I said this really feels Japanese, and then I started researching it, and at least the lead developers are not Japanese.
Yeah.
But the studio is based in Tokyo, and there is that Japanese aesthetic that was captured. So I have to believe that, like you said, that there was some influence from some of Sony's other studios and projects. But it is a game that is so refreshing because again, it's innovative. I don't know if you've ever used like the PlayStation 5 controller. I know you've, been pretty like not anti PlayStation 5, but you were just not interested in getting it for good reason.
Yeah.
Because
But
there's not a
but
lot.
I remember I told you I came really close once I got my hands on Astro Bot. Like when
Oh, so
I
you
played
played it.
I tested it out at a friend's house because he kept
Okay.
talking about it, and then the internet kept talking about it. So called up my friend. I was like, "Hey, did you get this?" And he's like, "Yes." I was like, "Can I come over and play a little bit of it?" Played a little bit of Astro Bot, and I was like, "This game is fantastic." It reminds me of like it reminds me of everything I loved in the PlayStation 1 era, like Jersey Devil
Yep.
or Crash Bandicoot and all that stuff. There's another game where you have to catch the monkeys. Um, in with the net, you go through different universes on the PlayStation 1. What is that game called?
Oh, I Ape
I
Escape?
Ape
No.
Escape. Thank you.
Okay.
Just the platforming alone just reminds me of that. And I was like, this game is great. If I had the money and the Switch 2 wasn't around the corner, I would have bought a PlayStation 5 just to play that game.
Yeah, I think it is that good, and it does a couple of things that I've always been arguing for. First, it looks great. I mean, as you saw, like it has that, beautiful light reflections and super high def, 60 frames per second. It's at 4K. But what it doesn't do is use things like ray tracing.
Mm.
It's a standard light map. It has some HDR, but it's pretty mild, and as a result, it runs beautifully. And I've
Yeah.
always said HDR, or not HDR, path tracing and ray tracing, to me, if it degrades performance so heavily that, yeah, I don't care if it's an accurate reflection. If I'm playing at 30 frames per second, I'm not interested.
Mm.
So, and then from everything I could tell, Astrobot was its own proprietary game engine.
Nice, because it looks beautiful.
Yeah, and like I said, I think when a game is developed around a bespoke game engine, it feels unique in a way that a Unity game or an Unreal Engine game, that, like I said, those feel kind of standardized.
Mm.
So that's just my personal theory, as you know, but this game really hits on all cylinders. Very, very special.
So before you continue, check this out. So I had to look this up because it was bugging me. So Team Asobi that made Astro Bot, they're originally Japan studio. They made games. They made Ape Escape. I just said that. They made Ape Escape, Legend of the Dragoon, Ico, Shadow of the Colossus, Loco Roco, Gravity Rush, and Last Guardian.
It's a pretty strong pedigree
That
there.
is so strong. That is a strong list of titles. So
Yeah.
so I don't understand. So did they just delete them and then bring them back as under a different name? Was that the thing?
Yeah, from what I found, like they closed that studio and then they redistributed the talent. I don't know if it was all to this team Asobi, but if you look at Sony's studios all throughout the world, I think like there's only this one in Japan.
Mm.
I may be wrong about that, or at least as far as like major studios under Sony, like many of them, the majority of them are here in the
Wow.
US, but there might only be one or two in Japan, and this is it.
Wow, they even worked on Bloodborne. That's no wonder this game is so great.
Yeah, and it's also, I guess we can't call it pure cart, but it is pure
Pure disc.
disc. Yeah.
It's no downloads, no none of that.
Well, I mean, it has software updates,
Oh, okay.
but I think like there was the website that we were talking about on the Discord. I'll link to it in the show notes. I forget what it's called, like disc only or something like
Right,
that.
right, right. I remember you showing it to me.
Yeah, and so that website lists this as kind of complete and pure disc in the sense that there's no, at least at this time, DLC available for it, or no forced download. You can play it without updating. But I
Okay.
guess like any product, it's going to have updates over its life cycle.
Hmm.
But I think there are certain games like that won't start unless you update,
Right.
and I don't think this is one of them. So, and it was, I mean, as far as I've played, like I got it shortly, like after launch, before the first update came out, and it was really, really smooth. Like there were no glitches that I could determine. It was wonderful. So I'm in kind of like a gaming heaven right now. Schim, Astro Bot, Echoes of Wisdom. It has been a very good fall.
Yeah, it has so far. Yeah.
So we usually at this point go on to news stories,
Hmm.
and I don't have any news stories like immediately prepared, but I think probably we should talk about the PS5 Pro because
Oh,
that really kind of was a negative one for Sony. What was your take on that announcement?
personally, I wasn't surprised by it. Well, I was surprised that other people were surprised because Sony. They I remember when they released. The first thing I saw was the pictures. I didn't really see the price yet. I saw the pictures first, and I was like, "So what's the difference now?" And I was like, "Doesn't the regular PS5 have this exact same look?" And then people started showing me that, oh, but now they added those three little vents on the side, and I was like, oh, so it's taller. I was like, okay, but I thought it was supposed to be smaller. If you're revisiting, you're doing a revision. You're supposed to make it smaller so that it costs less. And it was like, no, it's more now. It's $800. What? Wait, how much was it? 700? 800?
I think it's 700, but then they're forcing you to buy
The
the
disc.
external disk drive.
Right. I, I actually thought that was pretty funny. When they were like, the disk drive is sold separately. I was like, they mean the console with the disc is sold separately? I was like, no, the disk drive is separately. And I was like, all right. I was like, next thing you're gonna tell me is that the controller is sold separately. And then I found out that they give you a PS5 controller, but they don't give you the PS5 Pro controller with the Pro. That's what I was
Really?
hearing. That's what I heard. I didn't look into that because that just sounds like something. Like if I was a corporate scumbag, that's what I would do. I would I would just take out the controller that's made for the new console and sell it to you separate. I mean, if I'm already selling you the disc tray separately, why not? I
Well,
think it's
not only
I, I would say this. I think it's crazy that there's a lot of Sony fans that are kind of defending this. That was crazy.
really, I kind of thought that it was, universally kind of panned because not only are they selling you the disk drive separately, they may not have the Pro controller in. Actually, I don't know that they would put the Pro controller in there because that alone is like $200, I think.
Yeah,
So I don't think they're going to give you that for free, essentially. And there's also selling the stand separately.
right. And that's like an extra $30. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think like
$30.
all in, you could be getting close to $1,000 for a console.
Yeah, I did the math. It was about $890 minus taxes.
Okay.
No, not 890. I'm sorry. $830, but that's not including the tax. And I was just like, that's insane. And a lot of people are saying you might as well just get a PC at this point. But my thing is that you could get a PC, but a lot of people who, especially who are fans of console gaming, they don't jump to PC because they don't want the headache of what PC brings, especially when you're trying to upgrade. They just don't find that stuff fun. Or a lot of people they stick to what they know. Because they like brands. It's the same reason why people who buy Apple don't go Android, even though Android is arguably better. The brand is what sells them.
Yeah, I mean, I it did not appeal to me at all. I mean, first of all, when you saw
And
like the side by side comparison
yeah,
videos, granted it's over YouTube and obviously there's compression and maybe it's not as good as when you see it in, up close and personal. But I didn't see a lot of difference. Like,
yeah,
I would need the Digital Foundry guys to point out how this light is reflecting off the window in Gran Turismo, and honestly, again, I think these companies are creating graphical technologies that are forcing you to upgrade when you otherwise wouldn't. And, granted, they've always done that to a degree, but it was usually like, "Hey, look at this. Look, we can do 3D rendering with this
Yeah.
PC card like back in the day." Okay, yeah, I'm in. But now you're telling me, well, we can get a more accurate, lifelike reflection of the car next to you in Gran Turismo that you won't look at because you're focusing on the race, but it's
Right.
there. That
It,
to me is not really worth the upsell.
yeah, I think once it got to a point where people had to squint at the trailer to find the differences, I think that when it comes to that, it's time to back away, from buying the next console because, like you brought up, back in the day, we didn't have to do that. The graphical changes were so huge, we didn't have to squint to find stuff. It was just there. Like the jump from 16-bit to 64 was huge. And then it just kept jumping. But nowadays, there is zero jumps. But everybody is trying to. I wouldn't say everyone. There is a small percentage of people who are trying to say, but this is a graphical jump. And it's like, where? I can't find it. And and they point out the weirdest things like, well, look at this window. And I'm like, why would I be looking there? Or I saw the video where they said, well, look at the crowd difference. And I was like, but why? Why would I be looking at the crowd? Like, none of this makes sense. I'm not going to be looking here. But like I said, a lot of people, they I wouldn't say I like Sony, but the thing is that I like Sony PlayStation 1. I'm not a Sony fan. I'm more of a PlayStation 1 fan. I just like that era. But there's a lot of fans today who they have to defend Sony. And I just thought that was weird because I think that now it's gotten to a point where there's like not even a console war anymore. There's like this weird thing where it's like a fan war
Yeah.
because everyone is arguing about, well, um, Sony is doing this better than because now what is it like? I didn't even know this was a thing until the PlayStation release thing. Apparently there's like this weird argument between Sony and PC fans. Why?
Well, of course, there's always been the, PC master race thing,
Of
but
course,
I think now, as I understand it, it's about that value proposition. It's like, oh, well, if $1,000 PC could do all of this and more, why would you ever purchase the PlayStation 5 Pro? And then people are defending the PS5 Pro because they're fanboys. To me, it's like, as somebody who ultimately winds up with every console, usually when a Pro comes out, I'm like, okay, I'm going to sell my current system
right,
and take that money and roll it in and pay a couple $100 and get the latest and greatest. But I was so unconvinced by what I saw. Plus, my PlayStation 5 was a wedding gift for my wife, so I can't really just like, oh, I'm just going to trade it in.
right.
And I would be perfectly happy like taking it into the other room and buying the next console. But I don't use the PlayStation 5 enough to justify paying this huge price.
Yeah,
And secondarily, I don't want to support the death of physical media by purchasing a console that is designed without a disk drive,
right.
which I think one of the best criticisms that I heard was, if this is a enthusiast console, wouldn't your most enthusiast gamers want to have a disk drive?
Wow, that's a very good point.
Yeah, because we're the types that we have the massive collections, and we want to be
Yeah,
able to. Well, Sony doesn't want us to resell the games, but we want to have them for posterity. We want to be able to sell them when they become rare gems. So
yeah,
yeah, it
but
just
remember, I said, um, year like what was this? 4 years ago, 3 years ago,
yeah.
when the PS5 was when they first announced it. It didn't release yet. I said I feel like the PS5 that doesn't have the disc drive in it was going to be testing the waters. Eventually, they're going to get rid of it. And I said this exact same thing. If that should happen, if the next Nintendo console still honors physical games, they will corner the market on physical media when it comes to physical games. Because
You did call that.
if you still look at it, even though we're in a digital age right now, the Switch collectors are insane. We are a
We
crazy
are.
bunch. We are a crazy bunch.
We are, yeah, I think it may be the most intense group of collectors for a console currently within its life cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. I've never seen collecting like this before in any other generation. Whether it's Xbox or PlayStation 3, like I've never seen it this bad. Switch is horrible. It's horrible, and I only know that because I'm in it, and I see the collections that people have amassed when it comes to Nintendo Switch collecting.
And that's why I think our only hope is like you pointed out a couple episodes ago, there's going to be no collector's market amongst us in 10 or 15 years because we bought everything we wanted while it was coming out.
Yeah, yeah,
But I do wonder, like, is
yeah,
the like I said, the kid who was 8 years old when the Switch came out, and they can finally start to afford a collection in 2030 or whatever it is. Those are the people that are gonna keep the Switch going,
yeah,
and,
definitely.
oh, I'm really hoping that they love it as much as we do.
Well, yeah, because you have I and when I made that comment about there probably won't be a lot of people buying collectors, uh, buying up the games because they've become collectors in their later life. I never took into account what you just brought up is the kids who grew up with Switch today. Are they gonna want games later on? And I think if especially if you have like let's say me, like right now I have two boys and they grow up playing Nintendo Switch. Like I don't know, 10 to 15 years from now, they might turn into collectors too because their dad is a collector. I never took that into account before, so that is possible that it could happen.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to be the way of things, right? The kids grow up with a particular console, they become nostalgic, and at a certain
Yeah,
point, they're like, "Well, I couldn't afford all of this stuff back then, but I can afford it now." And I think the Switch probably, and I think I did talk about this on the episode, was if it's the one of the last physical media based consoles, although I think the Switch 2 will obviously have physical media as
yeah.
well,
I think the Switch 2 is going to have physical media too.
but I think people will see it in a positive light, like as the physical media component of gaming is dying, the Switch is going to be that console that carries the banner forward, even as the Switch 2 comes out.
I
So,
to you want I just want to say this because I think it's going to happen as 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 Sony and Microsoft move because they're obviously shifting towards Steam.
yes.
As they shift towards Steam and Nintendo, solidifies, their physical game market, I think that's going to start another company to come up and be competition for Nintendo. I think that's going to happen at some point because it has to.
Yeah.
It has to happen at some point. We're going to get another console. We just don't know who's going to do it. I just hope
Well,
it's
you
not
know,
like Google or something.
ugh. Well, I mean, after the Stadia debacle, like, I don't know. I mean, could it be this is just total fanboy dreaming. Could it be Sega again?
No, because I think the problem with Sega is too into they're too into Persona right now,
Yeah.
and Atlas. They're doing just fine with shipping out kind of the Atlas games. I doubt it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think like a lot of these companies that want to enter the gaming hardware space, they're not going to think physical. Like I think there's a a market for a consoleized Steam Deck. Valve could come up with something. Hey, Consoles are getting super expensive. The Sony's $1,000. The next Xbox is what it is. For $449, we're going to sell you something that'll plug right into your HD TV. It'll give you immediate access to your Steam library, maybe some cloud gaming functionality, a great new controller, and you can play everything at 1080p 60 or higher in certain cases.
See, I would agree with you if vinyl records didn't make a comeback.
Yeah.
I feel like and I didn't want to talk about this because I was in the process of writing an article, but I'll talk about it now and then finish the article later today. But I was thinking that I think that even though the digital age is coming, people deep down inside still like owning things. And I feel like video games eventually, as they move too much into the digital age, they're going to become the new vinyl record. Vinyl went away, CDs, kind of took over, and for years, CDs started to go away, and then vinyl records came back. Like people to this day still buy vinyl records over CDs. I think it's only natural that people, and even when you look at DVDs now, people are starting to notice that digital media, like they don't like to have. Well, I wouldn't say they. We as people don't like to be dictated by corporations that take things away from us. So we start looking back at the things from the past and start grabbing all that stuff. A lot of people like DVD sales have gone up on eBay. Like people are buying their DVDs again and they're buying DVD players. I've even found some stuff that I'm looking for, DVD based, because there's changes being made on like streaming services. There's movies that you enjoy watching that they take it away to make room for something else. And the more that happens, the more other companies are going to come by and say, hey, there's a market for this. I mean, look at Blaze Entertainment with the Evercade. Like
Yeah.
no, like everyone thought that Evercade was just this kind of, oh, we're just gonna release this one thing and then that's it, and then it kind of blew up. Now they're releasing all sorts of stuff. Like I got the Tomb Raider collection before everyone because I have the Evercade version of it. It's the 3 original games on Evercade that I can play on the Evercade, and then they released the Soul Reaver collection or the Legacy of Kain collection that's supposed to be coming out. I have it already on Evercade. It's on my cartridge that I can play on my Evercade. Like, I feel like the more that you have enthusiast programmers like that, there will always be a room to make physical media, even if the big three aren't doing it anymore. And then as soon as they start making too much money, then the big three start paying attention again. You know, that's usually how it happens.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, if you look at a company like Analog, right? They're making
Yeah.
the consoles. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say a company like that might, hey, we're gonna have a retro gaming business model. We're gonna give you the console, we're gonna give you the the software, and kind of mimic what Nintendo did way back then, and maybe beat competition because I think you don't want any one company to dominate any one particular space.
No. No, no.
And it's interesting. You've been talking about the Evercade for the longest time, and I still haven't picked it up. But that's another thing that is on my to-do list.
Yeah. It's
Have the
man,
physical games gone up in value? Like if you want,
yeah. So apparently, I sent you an article on this too because Evercade releases like blog postings and stuff like that. And what they do is they release something called the legacy carts. Legacy carts are the games where the licenses have run out and they are no longer printing those games anymore. There are several legacy carts right now from early on. You can no longer get them. They are running to the hundreds and up now for the Evercade carts. One in particular is the one that has all the Splatterhouse games on it. It's like a Namco collection. It has Splatterhouse 1 through 3. That one is the more expensive one that I've seen. That one and Double Dragon, it's a Technos collection. That one has gone up considerably, and something else. I don't remember the name of it, but there's several. So
Well, I
yeah,
probably missed the boat on those. So,
on those, yeah, for sure.
but yeah, you've kind of sold me on it, and it's just a matter of picking it up and going down the rabbit hole of that.
Yeah, Evercade's great. I haven't looked back.
So I'm trying to think of other, the Discord is so active with different stories and gaming. Was there another story I feel like that you had maybe like something about Ubisoft we were talking about
The U-
recently?
I mean, the Ubisoft news story has gotten way out of hand. I mean, it's something that everyone's talking about. That's the one where the Assassin's Creed story, the Star Wars story. Basically, they're losing a lot of money. That's what it runs down to. They've made a lot of games trying to appeal to a political demographic, which doesn't play their games. And I think that's the bigger question. I mean, that's the bigger. I wouldn't say question. It's more of like that's the big scope, grand scheme of things. Is that there's too many companies. It's not just Ubisoft. There's too many companies trying to appeal to a demographic that doesn't exist. And if it does exist, it's less than 1% or 3% or whatever percentage, but it's super low. And they don't cater to a demographic that actually buys their games. Um, I keep trying to think in my head like why does this keep happening? Like it's obviously not profitable, but why do they keep doing this? And then it kind of dawned on me is that they a lot of these companies make games in the heat of a controversy that they think is going to appeal to people, but games take so long to make that the game that they were trying to appeal to was in that year, and then 8 years later people have already moved on. So I think that's what's been happening.
That is an incredible point. Yeah, I never thought of it that way, but maybe in 2020, a particular cultural political point would have been better received, but when the game comes
Yeah.
out in 2024, it's an issue.
Yeah, it's like it's everybody has had 4 years of hearing about this, so they're tired of it, you know? And I think that what a lot of companies should have been doing, and they're catching up too late, is that they should have been thinking about the future instead of thinking about what the political climate is today or whatever they're creating their game in. They should be thinking, is this going to be the same 4 years from now? I didn't even know that one game. What was the game that flopped really really hard? Concord. I didn't even
Yes,
know
that was the Sony. Yeah,
Yeah, I didn't even know Concord took 8 years to make. Eight. That was what, 2016? Is that
yeah,
six? Wow.
2016.
Do you know how much the climate has changed since then?
Yes.
That is insane, man. That is insane. Yeah, you have to think about the future because games take too long.
Yeah,
You
and
should.
I think like, there's a way to maybe appeal to a broader demographic but not have it be ideological. Like I was thinking with the new Zelda game, right? You're playing as Zelda. You have
Mhm.
a strong female protagonist,
Right.
but it's not really a kind of in your face thing. It's just a fun game to play that's very creative and is doing new things. So, like to me that really should be the goal.
Yeah, I
You
agree. That's one of the main reasons probably why Astro Bot did so well is because they weren't trying to appeal to anyone. They just wanted to make a fun game.
Yeah. And the Astro Bot could be anything, it doesn't have a particular gender identity, cultural identity. It's just a bot
Yeah,
trying
it's
to find other happy bots in the universe and build a PlayStation 5 spaceship to go home.
yeah,
No
yeah,
ideology there. So
zero.
that's one of the topics when we were talking about Ubisoft is that if they go out of business, will their games become valuable? And if so, which ones? What are the best examples of
Oh, that's
Ubisoft games to pick up?
I love it. I'm going to be honest. Uh, I've already started picking up their games before this controversy even happened. And what I would tell everyone is to go to the PlayStation 3 and down. There is a lot of, what do you call them, like 3 packs that they have out there. There's a Far Cry one that has and it has one of the best Far Cry games on it. Everybody likes 3. 3 is great, but there's one called Blood Dragon that's
Oh, that's
on.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's on a it's a 3 disc game. It's like Far Cry 3, Blood Dragon, and I think Far Cry 4. I think. But I know Blood Dragon's on one of them. But that one's on disc, if I'm not mistaken. Then you have the one that I bought. I've been buying up a lot of what do you call them? Multi packs?
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
what you call them. I bought up the Splinter Cell one because that one was really hard to find. It has Splinter Cell 1, Splinter Cell Pandora's Tomorrow, and Chaos Theory. And Chaos Theory is the more popular one.
Okay.
And I bought that. I don't think the Ghost Recon games are going to be worth anything, mostly because um they're kind of military shooters, and military shooters tend to sell very well, so they're always gonna be easy to find. But games like Far Cry 3 was one of the most popular games, but to find it compiled with 2 more of the most favorite games is the hard part. So I would definitely get that. The Splinter Cell games are very niche, so they're definitely going to be hard to find. Um, but what's another Ubisoft game that trying to think. With the Prince of Persia games, the problem with those games is that they always sell well, so you're always gonna find them. Um,
Yeah. And you have Rayman, right? That was Ubisoft.
well, all of the Rayman games, I would grab immediately
Yeah.
because those games were unique. Rayman Origins was my personal favorite. I know a lot of people like Rayman Legends, but I would say grab Rayman Origins. Right, I grabbed them on PlayStation 3, but I would say grab Legends on the Wii U. And the reason why I would say grab the Wii U version is that I get this weird feeling that Wii U games are going to be really sought after later on, only because it has that peripheral of using that screen in your hand.
Yeah.
Um, you don't have a lot of consoles that have that dynamic. And I was even thinking about picking up what's the zombie? I think it's called Zombie U. I know it came out on PlayStation 3. It came out on other consoles, but the thing is that it's more unique in on the Wii U because you can go in your backpack by using the touchpad and move things around and do all these types of unique things. And I think that games like that or Rayman Legends where you have to drag things using your fingers on the touchpad, I feel like that touchpad alone is going to be something that people are going to look at way later on in the future.
Yeah, the Zombie U, it was funny because that was my first, like, Ubisoft speculation purchase,
Uh-huh.
and I think I got it brand new for maybe $10 or something,
hmm
and I think it's still at $10 the last I checked.
I would hold on to it
Yeah.
because I don't know, there's something about certain games that use the mechanic of the Wii U that I feel like is going to be sought after. Like people are going to be like, I'd much rather play the game like this, you know? Because I even have there's another game that uses it to a degree. And when I played it on the Switch, it just didn't have the same feeling. Like I didn't like it as much. It was the Wonderful 101. Like
Oh, yeah.
when you
Yeah.
play Wonderful 101 on the Switch, it feels just like a regular game. Like it just feels, yeah, I'm playing the Wonderful 101 or I'm playing any other game. But when you play it on the Wii U, you have to actually draw the different shapes and have the heroes turn into something, you know? Like it was unique.
Well, I see, I've always said that, like, Nintendo Land,
That's another
dirt
good one.
cheap dirt cheap, but there has never been another Nintendo game like that.
Yeah.
With, that variety of, do you use the motion controls, the touchscreen, and combination of both? I mean, yes, it was a tech demo, but it was a really, really good game.
Yeah. What's the other one that everyone like, the Wario one too?
See, I never played that one.
I
I
never
do
played.
not.
I never played it either. But a lot of
I
people,
forget the title.
they love that game. Like Game and Wario, I think it was called. Was that
Yeah,
right?
or
Game and
yeah,
Wario.
Game and Wario, or even Nintendo Sports. Like I don't know if you ever played the golf game
Oh, is that the one
where
where you lay it on the floor and you use the Wii U to hit the ball? The
yes.
Wiimote, right?
So yeah, the Wiimote is the club.
Right.
The ball is displayed on the Wii U GameCube
Right.
screen.
And you lay it on the floor and you have to
Yep.
hit it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. See, all that stuff is unique.
Yeah,
I'm
I
telling you,
love that.
because there's no other console that works like that. Like I guarantee it. Like people are going to be looking back at the Wii U. I would give it. Let's see. We're in 2024. I would give it to about 2029, 2028. People
Yeah.
are going to be looking back at the Wii U like, oh my god, this was revolutionary, but it didn't sell well, and this, and you can never find it anymore. Watch, I guarantee it.
Yeah, well, I agree, and, I'm thinking about it's like, "Oh, I wanna play that golf game again," but we were talking about, like, aging a little bit as gamers, so I remember when that came out. Now, granted, I was 12 years younger, but I got really addicted to the golf game with a buddy of mine. He would
Uh
come
huh.
over, and we would play it for, like, an hour, 2 hours, and just, like, the repeated motion of twisting to hit those shots,
Yep.
at one point, we were like, "I think we both hurt our backs." And we were kinda, like, limping around, he went home, and his wife was like, "What the hell were you doing over there?" I'm like, "Oh, don't ask, something to do with video games." So, like, if it hurt my back then, I'm like, "Holy crap,
Oh
what's
man,
it gonna
what's it
do to
gonna
me?"
do to you later?
Yeah, but, and I think that Wii Sports game did have a physical copy, but it's already pretty rare.
Is it really?
I think it was released digitally first,
Mm.
and you had to buy each of the sports. And then I think, they released, like you were talking about, like a 3-pack.
Oh no.
But, yeah, that was a little diversion from Ubisoft. What do you think about, like, the Assassin's Creed games? Like,
No.
the first Assassin's Creed?
I doubt it. No. I don't think Assassin's Creed will ever be rare. Ever. I don't think it's gonna be hard to find either. Mostly
Yeah.
because everyone who's bought Assassin's Creed. Okay, well, and also I think when did they start putting in like all the microtransactions? Was that Odyssey or one of those? I stopped
Yeah.
playing. I stopped playing Assassin's Creed games at Brotherhood, so that was like right after two. I stopped playing them. Um, I think, and even if you go back, it doesn't matter because there's just you can always find that game. Always. That game has been reprinted to hell. Um, you have to look at obscure games that
Yeah.
that Ubisoft has put out. Did they make? Let me see. Like that driving game that they put out that a
What
lot of
about,
people are talking
oh,
about.
the Crew?
Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be
Really?
rare. I don't think it's gonna be rare, but because you can't buy it anymore, and and it didn't sell all that great. Maybe,
But
but
wasn't that, like, purely online based?
I don't think so. The crew,
Really? Okay.
I think the crew had a physical, if I'm not mistaken, but I could be
Oh, no,
wrong.
it definitely had a physical release, but I thought the premise was, like,
It was
you
online
were
only,
yeah, you were in this driving club that they put you
right?
together with these other players, and you could only kinda, like, do the missions and go through the game world
Right.
through their servers. It's funny as I think of, like, the rare ones, right? Wasn't there a game Beyond Good and Evil
Is that
that was a
rare though?
Ubisoft?
Is that
The
is
one
that
for the
PS?
GameCube, I
I
think?
think it was PS2. Is that
'Cause
rare though? I don't think that's rare.
no? I have
Nah.
it for the GameCube, and, I didn't play it. It's been a long time since I've played it, but I know a lot of people like that one.
It has a cult following. I don't think it did well back then. Um, but I will say all of the Rayman stuff, like you said earlier, all of that, yes. But Beyond Good and Evil, it's hard to say. It's because they made one game. Not a lot of people cared about it, And that second one has been in development for how long?
I I couldn't even tell you. I thought it was out, but
Oh, then
I might be wrong about that.
yeah, they've been working on that game forever. Yeah, I don't think
And I'm
Ubisoft has a lot of unique titles nowadays.
yeah, it'd be interesting to see like because they've been around for so long. Like, what was their first game? I'm trying to find it here.
First game. Oh,
Yeah, because they've been
you're,
probably what around
you're
since
trying.
the
You're trying to go.
'90s.
You're trying to go. Oh, here's a game that might be something. Mario plus the Rabbids, A Spark of Hope.
Oh yeah, a
That's
lot of people.
that's like a tactical kind of like XCOM game.
Yes, a lot of people do like that. I've never played it, but
That's
it was
unique.
always on the list.
That might be one to grab. That might be one to grab for sure. That maybe this what's this called? Uh Ubisoft is weird, man. It's a weird one. Child of Light, maybe, but I doubt it because not a lot of people know about Child of Light. Trials Fusions is fun,
Yeah, that's a good one.
yeah, but yeah, Ubisoft is so weird because they're so vast. Everybody has their games, you know. It's hard to say what's going to be hard to find, but the Rayman stuff, that Mario game with the rabbits for sure, because that's a unique way to see Mario in a tactical strategy shooter.
Yeah.
So that might be something to grab in the future. But
You know,
everything else is no.
it's funny how I mean, just I'm going through the list now. The variety of games that they put out over the years is really astonishing.
Yeah.
And to think of what they've become and the kind of how they've narrowed themselves to one type of game that's now failing. I mean, they did the like I'm saying here, this a lot of people like this one back in the day, the IL-2 Stormovik flight combat game.
Oh wow.
Like,
Wow.
that's just incredible. Anyway, now I feel like I've got to go back and look at the Ubisoft games that I have and see what I need to buy. But I'm going for Rayman, and I like your recommendation on the Far Cry because
Yeah.
the 3 pack with Blood Dragon. Blood Dragon was a fun game.
Yeah. That is a really fun game. Oh, I forgot that they did the Tom Clancy Hawks games. That's like Ace Combat. I forgot they did
Yeah,
those. That one's a tough sell, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm not really seeing much here. I'm not really seeing much. Child of Eden. I forgot that they did that. Yeah. It's hard to say.
yeah. It's just, I mean, Colin McRae Rally for the Game Boy. I mean, unbelievable. Colin McRae Rally was a big one in Europe, I know.
Hmm.
But yeah, well, so someone actually is going to lead us into a listener question because Apollyon from the Discord had a
All
question a
right.
while back. We never got to it, but I think we need to get to it here. And he was asking like, what kind of strange sub collections are we seeking out or have we put together? Like he was talking about, he wants to have every N64 and Game Boy transfer pack compatible game. I feel like having like every Ubisoft game would kind of fall into that.
I am not doing that. Every Ubisoft game would be insane, but that's
Yeah.
a unique thing. Every transfer pack that
Yes.
that is hilarious. I don't think I have a weird thing. But I what I do have is like uh, a weird kind of game. But man, that's cool. Transfer pack compatible with N64 games is brilliant. I love
Yeah.
that. Um, I don't know. Do you have like a weird kind of collection thing?
I mean, nothing where I would say, "Oh, I've completed it." But there are definitely like sub collections, and I was thinking about the mahjong games on the Saturn. I think I've kind of gotten almost all of those
Uh-huh.
with a couple missing, but I have like all of the heavy hitters, like the Super Real Mahjong series, stuff like that. Um, I mean, at one point I was trying to get all uh Shin Megami Tensei games. At
Well,
this point, that's not anything special. I think a lot of people have gone for that kind of sub collection. But yeah, like I've started as we were talking about, like going after the train simulator games for
oh yeah, yeah,
Japanese
yeah, yeah,
consoles.
yeah. The Denshin to go.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
those are
Railfan, like I just
yeah.
got the Railfan Taiwan edition, which is pretty rare for the PlayStation 3. And I
Mhm.
think there's not a lot of those games, at least recently. So I would say that might be a subset that I'm slowly putting together.
If I had to think, if I had a kind of subset, it would have to probably be to grab every modern. Maybe this is a thing that I've accidentally did. I need to have every modern collector's edition of Ys games. Because remember I
Okay.
told you how I Frankensteined the Ys 8 collector's edition by buying
Yeah.
the PS5 version, and then I just sold the PS5 game but kept the box because I had the PS4 game, and all the boxes are the same across all the console platforms. So I just sold the
Yes.
game and kept the box. So that would probably be my thing. Is that I need every single collector's edition of Ys in the modern generation.
I think that's reasonable. And then when you look at all of your special editions and stuff like that, I mean that's a subset in a way in and of
Yeah,
itself, like the
yeah, it is.
Japanese collector's editions.
Yeah, and you know what else? I noticed that I'm slowly building up a collection of all of the cave shmups from Super Deluxe. Like I have all of the limited editions right now. I have all of them.
That is sweet.
Yeah. So all of the cave shmups from the 90s, all still sealed. Man, I have a problem.
Well, yeah, I mean I think in a way like you can be really specific, like, "Hey, I'm gonna get all the cave shmups." But I think every large collection has, if not subsets, like certain subcurrents of things going on in them,
Mhm.
where over the years, your interests change, like, and then you kinda go after certain things. So it's interesting. I'd have to go back and look and try to find more of those patterns because, like, I could say, "Oh, yeah, I love JRPGs," but within that, there might be a couple different types. Was it more like for a while I was really into just the tactical RPGs,
Right.
you
Same.
know,
Same.
and then at some point I discovered the visual novel, and I was like, oh, that kind of just helps me sleep if I click through a visual novel for 30 minutes, which, like I said, it was never really a game endorsement. Like, hey, buy this game; it'll put you to sleep. But as we said, we're kind of insomniacs, so if a game can kinda get me to go to sleep, like, I'm all in.
Yeah.
So then for a while, I was getting those. So, yeah, there's all sorts of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, next up, we're gonna do something a little different. We actually have a guest on the program, a special Nights On, Lights Off interview segment, the first one we've ever done. So let's cut to that. Welcome to a special interview segment on the Nights On, Lights Off podcast. This is Will from Game Escape, and I'm actually doing something different. I'm recording here in the daylight, but it's nighttime. We're just about nighttime in Tokyo, and I'm joined by a guest that I've wanted to talk to for a long time. His name is Oscar, and he is an American game developer working in Tokyo. Oscar, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on. It's very interesting to be on a podcast. I've actually never been on one before. I have been interviewed a couple of times, but it's been a while for that too. So I'm very happy to be here and hope it's an interesting conversation. I literally do not know what we're talking about besides me a little bit.
Well, you were one of the earliest people on our Discord, earliest members to join the Discord. And I feel like we've kind of followed your trajectory. I remember talking to you as you were kind of getting your career going, and it's been a couple years now, and I figured what a perfect guest to have on a show that's talking about Japanese gaming, import gaming, retro gaming, things like that. So, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about you, what you do in the industry, where you work?
Sure, yeah. So I currently work at a game company in Tokyo called Grezzo. I've only been there for about a year now, fairly recent. I started in like December last year. And Grezzo is not particularly well known. I feel like it's getting a little bit more known lately, but very interesting company. It's very close relationship with Nintendo. So a lot of the games that we've worked on have been a lot of the Zelda remake games, including like Ocarina of Time 3D and Majora's Mask 3D, and more recently the Link's Awakening remake on Switch, and even more recently the Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, which we just released. Um, and yeah, so I joined them fairly recently. And before that, I was working at a kind of no name contract developer in Kyoto, which unfortunately didn't work out super well in the end, but was an interesting experience overall and did bring me to Japan. And before that, I was a indie game developer mostly. So I worked on a game called Super Slime Arena, which is like a little kind of like party fighting game that I developed with a couple of my university friends. And it actually started off as a class project, but we sort of kept working on it over time. And eventually it kind of got to the point where we thought we should try to release it. And we did. And doing all that also brought us to a bunch of different game conventions, including one in Kyoto called Bit Summit, which I first went to in 2018 to exhibit. And that's kind of what kind of got me really properly on the hey, Japan is a real place and maybe I should try to live here train. And a couple years after that, it actually worked out and I moved over. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey for me for sure. And I still kind of feel like at my current position, because I'm still pretty new, that I'm still, you know, kind of trying to see if I'll even be at the company long term or not. But it's definitely it's a very interesting challenge and very like inspiring place to be, I'll say too. Yeah, I think I've talked a little bit. Yeah, if you have any comments on that, go ahead.
No, I mean, I definitely wanna get into transitioning over
Mhm.
there, working, getting into the industry over there, but I since you mentioned it, Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, I mean, are you able to tell us, if you worked on that, and if so, what you did with that game?
Yeah, I actually so I joined quite late in the development of that game, so I actually was not working on it. And it was kind of interesting because I was aware of it when I was there, but I didn't actually sign like an NDA or was ever like, debriefed about what was going on. I just kind of, occasionally would hear people talking about things, and sometimes I saw little bits and pieces of it. So I was kind of, obviously, even though I didn't sign an NDA, it wasn't like I could just tell people about, oh yeah, I saw this and I don't know what this is, and it seems interesting. I suppose it's not that surprising that Grezzo is making another Zelda game, but it was very interesting, sort of figuring out exactly what they were doing. And then obviously once I saw like the release, like the preview videos and stuff, it was very exciting. And yeah, I don't know, it's been cool, and I've been playing it recently too. We actually everyone at the company got a free copy of the game, so I've been playing it quite a bit and enjoying it quite a bit. I don't, yeah, it's been
Yeah,
very interesting.
I've been playing it as well, and I'm really impressed with it.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Um, I am not, and this is probably gonna get a lot of people angry. I'm not a fan of the new Zelda, like Breath of the Wild and Tears
Mhm.
of the Kingdom type games. I feel like I've always just liked the overhead Zelda games
Mhm.
from my youth. And when I played this one, at first I was kind of put off, like, oh, they're bringing in some of those Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild mechanics. But
Mhm.
as you play the game longer, I feel like it really works from an overhead perspective. And I think it gets you to kind of focus on the great art. It's not just an
Mhm.
action game. You're really thinking about how do you manipulate the environment. So I've
Yeah.
been having a blast with it.
Yeah, I definitely like I think the art direction works really, really well. And I've been actually very impressed with the sound as well. I feel like the music and sound design is really great. that's another thing. I kind of am of a similar opinion with Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild as well. And I think having a game where we actually have like proper dungeons again, and I guess it's not totally linear, but fairly linear story seems like, and it's more of what I'm used to. And yeah, I'm actually kind of interested to hear your opinions on it. Did you play the Link's Awakening remake? Because I remember one of your older videos talking about how that's a really, maybe I don't know if it's your favorite Zelda game, but it's definitely one that's very close to your heart. So I was kind of curious if you had any experiences with the remake and maybe how this current game maybe feels similar because the art style and a lot of other things are sort of carried over from the remake into this one. So I want to hear your
Well,
thoughts on
yeah,
that.
that the Link's Awakening on the Game Boy really is my favorite, and it was probably one of my, if I had to pick a top 5 game,
Mhm.
that would be up there. I did play the Switch re-release. I was very excited. It was really one of the games I was looking forward to. I think it came out in 2019.
That's
And
right.
I have to say I was a little disappointed by it because of the frame rate issues.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the engine in that game, and I would imagine the same engine in this game, it just as you transition from screen to screen or when there's a lot of objects and animations on the screen, it really does chug. Like you could feel it drop. I'm guessing it targets 60, but then it kind of drops down to 30 or below pretty frequently. So I felt like that threw me off enough where I didn't actually finish it.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, again, it has the same problems, but I feel like since it's not necessarily a pure action game, or at least not a pure action game in the way that Link's Awakening was, the frame rate doesn't bother you so much because you're kind of like focused on the screen and on the puzzle in front of you, and you're
Mm-hmm.
doing more with the environment. So there's not as many transitions. And then when you're in the actual dungeons, the frame rate improves.
Yeah, I've definitely
So
noticed that too. Mm.
yeah, so I would say, um, although playing this, I do kind of want to go back to the Link's Awakening re-release just because I probably should finish it because there's a lot to like. You can tell that there is such a respect for the material, and I don't want to sound tacky, but there's like a love for that source material in both of these games.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that too. I think I don't know exactly how like my boss and people in my company like originally convinced Nintendo to let them make the Ocarina of Time 3D because that was like one of the first games this company ever made. Which, to be fair, a lot of the founders of Grezzo are like ex Square Enix people. So, like, my big boss is Koichi Ishii, who's the guy who created the Seiken Densetsu slash Mana series, and is one of the original like Final Fantasy guys. So, like, he created Chocobos and Moogles among other things. So he's a very like up there guy. So I can understand why they maybe would give him a chance. But I think one thing I've heard a lot about the Ocarina of Time remake that people talk about fairly regularly is that they originally they were fixing a lot of the bugs that were in the original game, but because partially at least because a lot of the like speed running community and also just people that remember those games very well like were kind of more kind of nostalgic about the bugs and they thought that like leaving them in or sometimes even recreating them in ways that didn't interfere with the main experience sort of made it better for players. So I feel like there's kind of a crazy attention to detail, at least in some respects, for how Grezzo approaches mostly remakes and kind of just like game design in general. So I'm hoping that maybe if I work there long enough, I can sort of observe that and take some of that to heart and understand how and why they do a lot of that.
Yeah, it's funny when you play a game these days that has that love and attention to detail, it really stands out because on this show we've talked about kind of being a little bit jaded with the modern AAA gaming product and on some of the
Mhm.
practices, at least in the Western gaming market. But when people, again, when they're invested in the way it seems like your company is invested in these games, it's just really a breath of fresh air. So I have uh, the Ocarina of Time, remake in the closet. I have not played it because again, I'm a top-down Zelda guy, but now I feel like I want to
Yeah,
go
yeah.
back and see what it's all about.
I do like honestly like I like both styles of Zelda. I think I am a little bit more on like the top down side. I also really like Zelda 2, like the Adventure of Link, even though it's a side scroller. Um, but I definitely really recommend the Ocarina of Time 3D. I think it really it sort of highlights the best parts of that game while enhancing it. Obviously, it looks very nice. I think the UI is also really good, and also, yeah, about me a little bit more. Like, I'm mostly a designer. Currently, I work at Grezzo as a mostly UI UX designer, although I do a little bit of like scripting and implementation and stuff as well. Um, but yeah, I think for me, one of the other reasons why I was interested in Grezzo was because I think they did a really good job with streamlining the a user interface for Ocarina of Time 3D, and I was impressed by that. So I definitely, if you want to play Ocarina of Time, it's definitely, I think, the best way to do it. Outside of maybe some of the like fan made remake things, but yeah, Ocarina of Time 3D is very solid. So I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I think, that'll go on my list. I've gotta finish the new one, I'm gonna finish the Echoes game, and I also
Mhm.
have to finish Astro Bot, which has been the other game that I've really enjoyed here early on in the fall, but, the backlog is immense. You know,
Yeah,
we
indeed.
me and Jay, we he calls himself the Tsumige importer, and he
Mhm.
explained to me what that meant, kind of like hoarding and stacking games.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I'm in the same category there, but it's interesting. So you're a UI designer,
Mhm.
um, and it's funny 'cause I've always had a question of people who work in the industry. I don't know if this necessarily would apply to you or if it's just extremely naive, but I've always
Mhm.
wondered, how does a game get from a concept to a finished product? Like, do you begin with a game engine and a set of core technologies, and then you kind of think about, well, what could I create with this engine? Or is it really like, I have a concept, I do some concept art, I have some, UI ideas, and then you build the tech around that vision?
I would say probably just applies not just to this in general, but overall in game development. I think there's just a lot of different patterns. So for Grezzo's case, I actually haven't seen anything like go from start to finish. I basically only have seen like the end of stuff so far. So I'm not quite sure how like the initial concept things start there. Previous companies I've worked at, and also when I was an indie game developer, uh, the main like big game I worked on and released for indie games was that Super Slime Arena game I mentioned earlier, and that basically started off as a class project actually, and it was literally just to make a accessible fighting game. Um,
Okay.
so we literally had an assignment to design a game based around that, and then we made the demo, and then as we kept adding on to that, it sort of got big enough to be like an actual releasable product. But yeah, in that case, I guess we had what we wanted to accomplish. We had whatever resources we could find in terms of game engines, and we ended up making it in a relatively obscure one, which was kind of good and bad. But it's a engine called Hax Flixel. So Flixel is a action script library, which is basically like the programming language that was used to make Flash games. So it has a lot of like Flash-like things built into it in terms of like animations and tweening, and this Flixel in particular is sort of geared towards making 2D pixel art games. So it's also all free and open source, which is cool. So we thought it was an interesting project, and we wanted to make like a side-scrolling 2D fighting game, kind of like Smash Brothers, basically. Uh, I guess yeah, Smash Brothers, but 2D. uh, but yeah, that's why we ended up choosing that engine. Um, so I think it depends a lot, and I will say at Grezzo, like it seems like we're not like actually like a Nintendo company. We do contract developer for other companies, and we make our own stuff as well. It kind of seems to depend on what makes sense for the project and what our expertise is. I mean, for example, the project I'm currently working on, which is called Jet Dragon, and has already been released. It's a Apple Arcade game, so it's on like iOS and Mac devices. kind of get the feeling that Apple Arcade is not super popular, so I don't know if any people have actually played it, but it's a pretty interesting kind of like racing dragon, like breeding simulation and like team management game. So basically, you have like a team of riders that ride racing dragons, and you also are raising the dragons yourself. There's a little bit of a story too. The gameplay, I would say, is like relatively simple on like the action part of it where you're racing, but relatively complex on the like management part of it because you also have sort of this giant floating fortress called a tower ship that you can like build buildings on and upgrade and manage your teams and stuff. It's not crazy expansive, but anyway, that game was the first game that Grezzo made in Unity, which is one of the major game engines out there, and relatively recently it's been somewhat controversial too because they uh, were planning to start charging developers a like per install fee. So anytime someone installed a game you made, you would have to pay Unity a certain amount of money, which
I
was
remember that
yeah,
controversy, yeah.
which was extremely unpopular with game developers. And actually, very recently, I think maybe like last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, they apparently have walked that back now. So kind of lost a lot of goodwill and like developer interest for nothing. It seems like, but
Yeah,
Grezzo started that game, yeah, way before the controversy. Sorry, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say that, you talked about Apple Arcade, and yeah, I don't think it's, that popular in America, but I did notice when I was, in Japan, like, a lot of mobile gaming going on in the subways, so, you know, I could see is that the case, or was that just what I kinda noticed on my
Yeah,
particular route?
I don't know about Apple Arcade in particular, but definitely mobile games, particularly like people that are on commutes, are very very popular in Japan. When I'm taking the train, which I ride like the Yamanote line every day, which is kind of the most main sort of like loop line that goes around Tokyo.
Yeah, I spent a
Uh,
lot of time on that.
yeah, me too. Yeah, I'd say like a good, probably at least like 30% of people are playing some sort of mobile game, and I know that Jet Dragon is more popular in Japan than it is in America. I don't know what the exact numbers are, but yeah. I think also, even compared to America, I know iPhones are like definitely the most prominent like phone operating system in Japan. So probably works out that that game is slightly more popular because of that as well. But yeah, definitely. I see people every once in a while. I'll see someone pull out like a DS or a PSP or
Huh.
something even older. Sometimes, whenever I see that, I get really happy because I actually still play my DS Lite fairly often on the train. Um, Sometimes GBA. Although lately, because I've been playing Zelda, I've been bringing my Switch, which is still a little bit too big for me. I think I might want to get a Switch Lite just because it is smaller and a little bit more easy to deal with on the train.
Yeah, and then, of course, when you're on these trains, at least maybe I found this, it's hard to get a seat, they're so jammed, like,
Yeah.
how do you game effectively? So I think the phone kinda lends itself more than, pulling out a big Switch, or imagine, like, the Steam Deck or something like that,
Oh
that I don't think
yeah.
that would work.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
Sometimes I get lucky and I can get a seat, but yeah. My commute uses multiple trains, and the other train that's not the Yamanote line is a bit less crowded most of the time. So usually, at least for about like half of my commute, I can sit down. So that's kind of nice.
and
Uh,
I was mostly standing, and I'm a, kind of, pretty tall guy, so I was able to survey what everyone was doing. And
Nice.
I that's when I noticed, a lot of the gaming, and I could see how this, Jet Dragon game would be popular because it sounds to me like it's kind of a mixture of Winning Post and Pokemon, something like that. Would that be a fair description?
Yeah, a little bit. So there are definitely different varieties of dragons you can uh, find and breed. It definitely takes a lot of influence from those like Japanese horse racing simulation games. I think my big boss, worked on, what was it? Not Chocobo Racing, but like Chocobo. It's just called Chocobo Stallion. There's like that Chocobo like racing game where you also sort of like breed them. I believe it is
Yeah.
sort of take influence from that.
I don't know, that's one genre I have not gotten into, is the Japanese horse racing simulators. And I feel
Yeah.
like I've gone so far down the rabbit hole on a lot of these games, whether it's Mahjong or now like the train simulators.
Oh yeah.
Um, Shy introduced me to a series called Furaiki. It's kind of like the motorcycle tourism game,
Mm,
so there are all these different genres, but the horse racing, that is, I mean, there is obviously horse racing in the States, but it has declined so much in popularity that it just seems such a foreign concept to me.
yeah, I see. Yeah, it's
But
definitely interesting in Japan how popular it is. I think part of it is because like Uma Musume is still very very popular here, like
mm.
both the anime and the game and whatever else is around it for it. There's probably other things I don't know about Uma Musume, but it's funny. Like you go to the game centers and you'll see like stuffed plush versions of like actual race horses. People are like trying to get into UFO catchers. So it's still like just regular horse racing is still really really big here, and it's interesting how these like salaryman hobbies from a long time ago are still very relevant here and becoming even more popular now because of the sort of crossover stuff like Uma Musume, which I think in particular is just kind of an amazing like combination of all these different like interests that people have in Japan, particularly like the stereotypical salaryman because it has like horses obviously and horse racing and I guess to a certain extent betting. It has like their cute girls, which people like cute girls in general, but yeah. And they're also like idols. So like after they do their race, they do like an idol like music performance thing.
So,
So I feel really sorry for these girls. They have to like run all day and then perform after their race. And Jesus, this sounds so tiring. But I guess if they're like horse girls, they, they have lots of energy. But it really is, yeah, this bizarre combination of salaryman interests.
cool. Yeah, that's well, there's so much to discover in the Japanese culture that you don't necessarily realize until you either go down the rabbit hole or go over there. But I wanted to circle back to you,
Mm,
making the transition and working over there. So you said you released this game, you went to a trade show convention, and that's kind of how you made contact with at least the idea of going over there. But how
mm.
specifically did you make the transition? When did you know, hey, I want to be a developer over there versus in the States?
I guess one part of it is that the games industry in the states, while obviously you can get paid a lot more than you can be in Japan, is very very volatile. Like I know a lot of people that still work in it over there, but many of my friends, even at like very large companies that have been there for a while, have been laid off at least once or twice, and particularly recently, like in the last 3 or 4 years, it's just like there's absolutely no like job stability in it. Um, and I think particularly if you have to move to some really high cost of living area like San Francisco or Los Angeles or Washington or whatever, like Seattle area, um, it can be. I think for me, it just seems kind of scary because it's like you don't, for one, you don't get paid that much. I mean, compared to Japan, you get paid more, obviously, but you know, if you're in a situation where you're on like a year contract or you've been there for a while and then suddenly you get laid off, I feel like you can very easily just get completely screwed in the states. Particularly, yeah, if you're living really far away from your family and living in a very expensive apartment. And I kind of just didn't want to deal with that. So for a while, I tried being an indie developer, and I wasn't mega successful at it, but I think coming over to that convention in Kyoto and also just taking some time to be around Japan and I guess noticing it was relatively low cost of living, which was nice. Um, and meeting some other developers that had made the transition while I was over there, kind of inspired me. I wasn't dead set on it from the start, to be honest. Like I thought it would be really nice, but I also think, well, it'd be pretty hard. I did, at that when I first went to Japan, I basically spoke no Japanese as well, so it was very limiting in that way. Um, but yeah, eventually I got to the point where the development on the Super Slime Arena game had basically been finished. There's a couple other things that happened in the middle of that, but I don't really need to get into it here. But um, basically got to the point where I was looking for a new job, and I wasn't, as I said, I wasn't like dead set on it, but I did apply to some places in Japan and didn't get that much success to be honest, but eventually did um, find the company in Kyoto that I worked for before I worked at my current company and obviously the pandemic also happened in the middle of all that, so I did spend about a year waiting to actually come over, um, which was pretty tough. But I was able to do some contract work in the middle of that, so it wasn't like I was starving or anything. But it was mostly just waiting for the borders to open again.
Interesting,
Um,
yeah. I was
yeah.
wondering how did the so, like, what does the job hunt look like as somebody who, is based in the States but applying over there?
Mm.
And obviously you had the language barrier, so, like, what was that process for you?
Yeah. So originally I was looking mostly online. Like I did meet some people while I was there, and I had a couple interviews with places that they were mostly foreign staff there, so they didn't really need the Japanese language at the from the start. Um, so I almost got a job working for a company that is kind of involved with like the RPG Maker series because they were making basically a new game engine, and they wanted to hire a pixel artist, which I did a lot of pixel art for my indie development stuff, basically to make asset packs and also help on some like basically example games that they're making with the engine. And actually, I had a friend from my same university who ended up coming over to work as a programmer in that same company. Um, but I think they ran out of funding, or they something happened with like the money part of it in terms of that position that I was going to have uh, sort of evaporating. So I ended up not being able to do that. Um, so after that, I was looking around for a while. I applied to some places online, but there's honestly not that many places that are willing to just take kind of even people that have some experience, but not like a huge amount of experience that don't speak Japanese. So the first job I ended up getting in Japan was largely because of a friend that I met in Boston. I went to university in Boston, and they were half Japanese, and they were living in Japan for a while, studying Japanese at Kyoto University, and also working at the company that I ended up working for, which is like a small, mostly like contract developer. They mostly don't do games, honestly. They do some games, but um, they said they were interested in making more game stuff, which is why they hired me. And they were basically, I think they have like one Japanese staff, but everyone else is various types of foreigners, mostly Europeans, but there's also a handful of people from kind of just all over the place. Um, so in that case, yeah, I kind of found a little niche where I could get in, where it was like a foreign company where you didn't have to speak Japanese. They wanted to make games, but they were a really small company, so they kind of wanted somebody with like indie game development experience because it was basically similar, like team size. Um, don't need to get in too much because it kind of didn't work out in the end. I got laid off in a pretty nasty way, and there was a bunch of uh, bad things that happened at the end of that. But that's basically how I got over here. And
Interest
yeah, I'll say another thing is like if people that are interested that are coming over to Japan, the main way that Japanese companies in general and also Japanese game companies hire people is usually called like new graduate hires. Um, so even if you're graduating from like a trade school type thing, when they do have a lot of them here, they're specifically for sort of like media and game development and things. Once you graduate, they have a very formalized system of where it's like, okay, this is like this time you are going to go out and do a bunch of interviews, and you're going to try to get a job before this deadline, and a whole bunch of people get hired at once, kind of deal. So since I've been at Grezzo, I've actually seen that process happen once, where we got a whole bunch of the new graduate hires come in. Um, so even obviously most places still need you to speak Japanese, but even if you're foreign, if you come over here and do a sort of trade school type thing, which some of the programs I think are only like maybe 6 months or a year long or something, um, that gives you an opportunity to join a company as a new graduate hire. And I think sometimes you can even do that if you're here for like language school. So if you already have a lot of skills and you want to just come over here and study Japanese and then graduate from that and then get a job, that's also a way. Um, in my case, like my current job for Grezzo, um, I had been in contact with like an art director there for quite a while on social media, actually. And I just been talking to him and sort of sharing some of the artwork I've been working on and getting feedback and stuff. And eventually I told him about what was happening with my last job and how it was kind of not going well and I needed to get something new. And he didn't like hire me on the spot or anything, but I think he put in a good word for me. And then kind of funny because I did a couple like casual interviews at Grosso before I did like a proper interview. So the first one was literally just meeting the art director guy that I knew online for a while at an izakaya, and we
Huh.
kind of just talked about yeah, like what was going on with Grezzo, what he wanted to know more about my experience, and uh, it was very like yeah, I'd say just like a casual interview, like mostly talking about work stuff, but a little bit about me personally and why I was interested in Grezzo and how I even knew about Grezzo and whatnot. And then after that, I actually met a bunch of the like higher up staff along with another guy who was interested in the company who was foreign, and I was with like a French guy. He's like a mostly like a concept artist, kind of storyboarder type guy. He worked a lot in animation before, so he was interesting fellow. But yeah, basically me and him, and then the art director guy that I know, and then actually the big boss of Grezzo. We had dinner and we talked a bunch about like what like Grezzo wants to do in the future and how we might fit into that. And the French fellow didn't really speak very much Japanese, so I was also kind of like trying to be sort of like translator mode, although I'm not particularly good at that to be honest. um, but yeah, that happened, and then after that, it seemed like things were going really well. So I was like, oh man, this is great. Like they're just gonna give me an offer. This is awesome. And then I waited for about a week and I didn't hear anything back. And then I got in contact with the art director guy again, and I said, "Oh yeah, like I had a really good time, and very interested in Grezzo. Um, like what's happening next? Because it seemed really positive. Like, oh yeah, things are gonna be great, and I'm gonna get an offer because I needed an offer pretty quickly to keep my visa actually. So it was a little bit scary. Um, but eventually, it turns out it's like, oh yeah, you just have to like apply normally now. It's like all that stuff was just kind of it was nice, and I'm sure it helped, but I just had to send in my send them like the HR staff like my resume, and then I did two more like actual interviews with other staff, uh, mostly like the head UI guy, and then sort of like the general manager of the company. So my big boss is still Ishii-san, but he doesn't run like the day-to-day stuff of the company. So basically, like the general manager and one of the other like lead art people was my last interview, and it was actually fairly difficult. Like they, went through my whole portfolio that I sent them and asked a bunch of questions about how I did stuff and why I did stuff and how big the team sizes were and stuff like that. And eventually, did get an offer, so it did work out. But it was a pretty long process. I think at least like 2 months or so of doing the interviews and waiting and coming back for another interview and submitting a bunch of documents. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up at Grezzo. Sorry if that was a very long,
No,
somewhat rambling monologue.
I mean, I think it's actually fascinating to see, how that kind of process works because I mean, interviews are, I think, to a degree culturally specific, that
Mhm.
each kind of company in different countries is going to have their own process, but I think for someone who's looking to get into the industry over there, it's good to hear that. I mean, do you
Mhm.
think that the informal dinner izakaya type contact, is that typical where you kind of network, you get to know the people informally, and then you go through this formalized process? Or was that just kind of specific to your experience in Grezzo?
Say it's probably somewhat rare, but not unheard of. I think if you're what they call like a mid-career hire here, so someone who already has experience, you're not like a new graduate, that's probably fairly common, but not crazy common. Like I think a lot of people just they just apply directly and then they go. You are able to, meet someone, and I've been talking with the art director guy for like well over a year before I was like, oh, I'm going to apply to Grezzo. I need to apply to somewhere. Um, so I wasn't even doing that specifically with the intention of like, oh, I'm going to apply because I thought that my skills and my Japanese weren't good enough up until then, but I was, talking with him and showing him what I was working on and trying to improve. So I'm sure that helped. Finding someone who has enough time and interest to actually sort of listen and look at your stuff, I think, can be difficult in general. Um, but I think in Grezzo's case, and particularly that art director's case, I think they were also kind of interested in hiring like more global people, for lack of a better word, hiring foreigners to some extent. Because Grezzo is about 100 staff right now, and we have, I think, two people from Taiwan, one guy from Korea, and then me, and everyone else is Japanese. So I think I don't know specifically why, but I think that the art director is kind of interested in maybe just getting more, I guess, diverse opinions and experiences to sort of contribute to with stuff we do there. And probably having at least one English speaker can be useful in some cases too. So that might have also helped me a little bit in this case because they do not have any like English speakers. Um, so yeah, it probably depends a lot on the situation. I think a lot of the larger game companies in Japan have a lot more foreign staff now. Like my friend I mentioned before who worked at the company making like the game engine, he actually currently works at Sega. He's been there for I think maybe like 2 years now or so. He's having a great time at Sega, and obviously Sega still mostly does everything in Japanese as well, but they have a lot more foreign staff. So a lot of those companies, I think, if you have enough skill, they will even accommodate English speakers that don't know very much Japanese at all. I think like Bandai Namco specifically mentions they have sort of like a translation team, like in-house, I guess, bridge team that sort of helps with anybody that doesn't know Japanese yet. But usually they also will encourage you and maybe even like force you to get Japanese lessons eventually. So
Well, yeah, so
obviously,
let's
yeah.
let's
Mm.
talk about the language barrier. I mean, so how did you become proficient enough to, function in the workplace after you got there?
Yeah, so after that first trip to Japan, I did start taking lessons in America. Not very intense lessons, so they were like once a week for like I think an hour or maybe an hour and a half. I used to live in like the Washington D.C. area. There's like a Japan America Society of Washington D.C. that gave like these lessons, and they were quite affordable, and they were just like group lessons and very basic. I think I got like they have obviously katakana, hiragana, and a lot of really basic grammar from that. Um, I would say that probably I didn't really start learning like properly until I moved to Japan. Um, and because it was the pandemic, I think I was a little bit in a bit of like an English bubble for quite a while because yeah, you couldn't really go out and do as much things as you would normally, and it was kind of I guess dangerous to do so even. Um, but eventually, I did also get a Japanese girlfriend, and she didn't really speak English, so that was probably the main reason why I was sort of put into situations where I had to use the Japanese I knew already and work very hard to get better at it quickly. Um, so that helped a lot. I would say definitely don't just date somebody because you want to learn their language, but it did end up kind of working out for me in that way as well. And I think largely because of her, I was able to get pretty good at speaking Japanese. I still had a lot to learn in terms of reading, which I'm getting a lot better at recently because all my work communications are in Japanese and I have to read a lot. Um, but yeah, that's basically my experience, and I'm still taking lessons as well. I still take like weekly lessons with a one-on-one teacher. So I'm trying to pass the N2, which is the second highest level of like the official Japanese proficiency test. Hopefully, can
Yeah.
pass. I think I might be a little bit like giddy giddy, as they say, like not quite there, but maybe there. Like I'm not sure, but um, I am able to mostly communicate without many problems in daily life and at work as well. So think obviously coming over here and having some reason that you need to slash want to use it a lot will help a lot. And I'm actually playing the Echoes of Wisdom in Japanese too, and surprisingly not really having any issues with that, even though my kanji isn't amazing. But it's a fairly simple game too, story wise. So that probably explains a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. I mean, dating someone and speaking their language is just a great way to learn. As somebody who, I kind of studied and lived in Europe and found that
Mm-hmm.
to be very true.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, having that reason, I think, is critical. But I also would say like it's so easy to find through the internet just material, like you said, you're playing a game in Japanese. You
Mm-hmm.
know, that can help too. But what it's funny. I was wondering, so you had the language barrier, you're taking the classes and you're kind of you've learned how to kind of overcome that. But is there any like what I would call workplace culture shock, where you're like, man, they just do things so differently over there? Is there anything like that, or just, pretty standard kind of game development atmosphere?
Say it's fairly standard. I guess also from my experience, I haven't worked at like a large or even like large-ish game company in America, so I'm not quite sure how different it is. Um, but I haven't had any like really like huge crazy culture shock moments in general, not just at work, like just in general. Although I think part of that is because I do enjoy and have experienced a lot of Japanese media of various sorts, so
Hmm.
I already kind of know a lot about how stuff works here. I guess like learning the sort of formal structure they do in business meetings can be kind of interesting. Although Grezzo is not particularly like crazy formal. Like we don't always use Kego, for example, which is sort of a very like formal type of speaking. Use it a little bit, but generally speaking, yeah, it's kind of just a standard polite but not crazy polite version of Japanese we use. I guess like one thing I got used to is that you have to write a daily report every day in Japanese, and it has a very specific structure that you like email to your managers. So there's a lot of things in general about email that are extremely formulaic, and there's kind of good and bad things about it. I'd say the good things about it are that because it's so standardized, like you can just look up like if I'm writing this type of email, like what do I use, what word do I use here, and like what structure do I use here. There are many websites on the Japanese internet that just explain what to do in every situation. So you kind of can just look up what you're supposed to do, which is quite nice. The bad part is that it's often like like emails are generally like business emails are very formal Japanese, and probably they gave me a little bit of slack because I'm a foreigner. But I think if you're Japanese, you probably have to be really careful about like what words you use, and um, in general, there's a lot of stuff in the Japanese language about like knowing who is sort of the person above you in hierarchy or age or otherwise, and using the right words to talk about like what they do versus what you're telling them, and it can get kind of confusing. And they're just long emails too. But because a lot of them are very formulaic, you can like copy paste a lot of the basic parts and just fill in the things you need to actually talk about. So it's kind of a mix of that. So I guess like that's one thing. Like I think also just using a lot of email versus we do use a thing that's kind of like Slack at Grezzo too. So a lot of our communications is um, maybe pretty similar to what you would do in the West with like a Slack or whatever, but still a lot of email use as well. But I don't know if that's that different from like the big game companies in the States. I've only really done like any dev and small companies, so we were always very like casual about pretty much everything at
Do
the
you
small
think
places.
these daily email reports like are actually read and they're really going over with a fine tooth comb, or is it just kind of a cultural thing like everyone must submit them?
I think they are read because I do get like comments from like things that I mentioned in my email. Although I think it's usually pretty basic to be honest for like what you did, because a lot of times it'll be like, yeah, today's work like concerning like this part of the game we're developing. I continued doing what I did yesterday, and then I did this, or maybe I found a bug or something like that. And there's sort of ways that you can like put things in brackets and like bold, and like there's sort of like a hierarchy they've sort of designed, which is probably different per company, but the one that Grezzo uses is like fairly easy to like highlight when you need to talk about something important. Um, I guess I don't know if like every single one of them is read and by how many people, but
Huh.
probably not a crazy amount. But yeah, it does seem like if you're like a manager person and you had to read all the daily reports from everyone on your team, that would be a lot of time, which it could also just be that they spend a lot of time. I guess one thing that I haven't directly experienced that much myself, but a lot of the senior staff at Grezzo do have to work fairly long hours fairly often. And that's kind of is what a lot of people expect from like Japanese companies in general. And it's kind of true. Like there's a lot of not crazy overwork, but just people staying late fairly often. And in my case, in Grezzo's case, it's usually like the more senior staff, which is I don't know if that's normal or not, but it's kind of interesting to me. Because my impression was that maybe they would do that more for like the newer staff to sort of like prove that they're super loyal or something. But in Grezzo's case, they basically try to make all the younger people go home if they stay any kind of late. Like I work late every once in a while, and usually when I do, they're like, "Yeah, go home."
Well,
That's
yeah,
interesting.
that's my kind of sort of rudimentary knowledge of Japanese companies kind of comes from my wife, who
Mhm.
works for one of the larger ones in Tokyo, and although she's obviously based here in the States, but her managers are Japanese, and her work hours are crazy. Like
Mm,
she's working 14, 15, 16 hours a day.
yeah.
Um, but when she's over there, same deal. But
Mhm.
it's kind of funny. There's a reason why I asked you the question about like workplace culture shock is I've talked to a number of people over my life who have worked there. And I get these like two accounts. So
Mhm.
it's just like some people say, it's the Japanese are so rigid and overly bureaucratic, overly hierarchical. And as foreigners, people feel like, oh, they have to do like sometimes double the work of their colleagues to get ahead, work the long hours. And I've met people like you seem to enjoy it. And my wife definitely enjoys it. And she says that she loves working for a Japanese company because even though the hours are long, she feels respected by, her coworkers or boss. And it's just a great place to be in comparison to Western companies, perhaps because there's that stability that you were mentioning that, you're not going to get laid
Mhm.
off when the next financial quarter. So,
Yeah.
I mean, did you ever feel like that pressure of, hey, I've really got to prove myself above and beyond what my Japanese coworkers have to do? Or is it, just you're one of the team and you don't have to think about it?
I mostly feel like I'm one of the team. And I think actually in some cases, they kind of give me more slack because I'm a foreigner. It probably depends a lot on the company. And I think it also depends on I've heard that like Asian foreigners in Japan sometimes have it really hard because they're basically have the same expectations of Japanese people. Overall, I've heard that colloquially. That's probably not true in every case, but I've heard it can be harder because because they think they're closer to Japanese to sort of have the same expectations. I'm like very visibly for an American guy, so they probably don't have the quite same expectations for me. But I really want to say that for Grezzo, particularly someone who has not actually worked at like any famous companies before Grezzo, they have been very, very kind and like both on like the Japanese side and just like the game development side too. Like I've been learning quite a bit. And even though people are really, really busy, I do feel like they do take the time to try to explain things to me and show me how to do things and sort of like help me sort of fit in with the team as well. I've had a little bit of like feelings of like being kind of separate from the team sometimes too though because I wasn't working on Echoes of Wisdom and most of the people were. There were some cases where it felt like everyone was really really busy on this project that I didn't really know what was going on exactly, and my initial contract actually was only to work on Jet Dragon. My current contract is actually open to work on whatever, so I think I might be starting a new project relatively soon. um, but yeah, that felt a little bit not necessarily isolating, but it did feel a little bit strange to be like in this really busy place, but you're not actually working on the thing that's making everyone really busy. Um, but yeah, everyone at Grezzo has been really nice to me so far, and yeah, I feel really glad to be there. And I don't feel like there's over like hierarchy things going on. I feel like everybody is basically treated as like the same, which I think also I said before that like we don't really use the really super formal Japanese like keigo at Grezzo. It's mostly just everybody on the same level. And a lot of my coworkers that sit near me are actually really nice, and we just talk about random stuff. And there's one of the new graduate hires also knows a lot about like indie games, so like I see him at game conventions and stuff. So sometimes we hang out. So overall, it's a very good environment, I think. And even though it is busy and long hours sometimes, and probably if I become like a full time like forever employee, what they call seishain in Japanese, I might be doing like more overwork or not like long hours, I guess maybe a better word. But it seems like it's a good team and people sort of try to have fun with it. And obviously, I think we make really good stuff too. So in that way, it kind of feels like even though I'm working hard, at least I'm making a really cool thing that hopefully lots of people will care about. So that I think that helps with the motivation part of it as well.
So you mentioned this a couple times. You said Keigo, this super formal Japanese. Like, just briefly tell us like what that is. Is it just a totally different type of language that you have to learn, or is it just what's the barrier of entry? If let's say you have basic Japanese, you're proficient, how long does it take to learn that?
I think it can take a while. The thing with Keigo is it's not necessarily like that much more complicated than like regular polite Japanese, but they do use just different words. It's like the main thing. And basically there's like humble form and honorific form, and you're supposed to use honorific form to talk about the actions that people are like above you in the hierarchy do, and the humble form to talk about stuff that you do. And other nuances in that too, like if we're talking about like something that uh, another company does and your company does. So there's a lot of sort of like social hierarchy things you have to think about to know which one you're supposed to use in which situation. Which I think that plus just having to learn new words that basically mean the same thing. Like taberu is a word for eat, but meshi ageru is like the keigo way to say that. Um, and because you don't use it very much in your daily life, it's just kind of like, oh, I already know how to say this in regular Japanese, but now I have to think about one, like what my relationship is with and who I'm talking about, and then two, if there is another word, I have to use the other word. And because often there's two different words, it just gets confusing. Honestly, if you do it a lot, probably it's not that hard and becomes second nature. And I do know a little bit of Keigo, so I'm not like a complete idiot either, but um, I think considering that just speaking or just knowing like casual form Japanese and polite form Japanese, and then having to add like kind of two different levels onto that, it's just kind of a lot. And because you have to think about all these other things in the background, it's a little bit more difficult to get out unless you probably if you do it very often, it's very second nature. But for me, I think it's partially just because I don't practice it that much, and it also seems generally not that useful because yeah, I don't know. It's only used in specific situations, and at my company, we also don't use it very much. So I might never get good at Keiko. I guess it may be the thing I'm trying to say.
Well, I mean, it's sad to see. I never knew that. That is fascinating. I knew about like the honorifics and the politeness, but I didn't realize there was these, like you said, two levels above that. You know, on our Discord, sometimes you post some pictures of events that you go to and things that you encounter. As a developer over there, what was kind of the coolest experience that you've had in the scene, so to speak, over there?
I will
As
say
far
that.
as
Mm, those.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Oh, I would say that like definitely the first time coming over here and showcasing my game at that convention in Kyoto that's called Bit Summit was a very like cool moment of my life, and I think that's probably the main reason why I ended up like seriously considering moving here. Um, Part of the cool things that happened there was because there was like a publisher that was courting us, and they kind of were one of the people that like was running the convention, so they had a little bit of power in that situation. So, for example, one of the things that happened at that convention was the game I made, the Super Slime Arena, was like a multiplayer game, and we had a whole bunch of like famous game developers come up on stage and play it with me, which was really cool. Like there was like Igarashi, the Castlevania guy, and Swery, um, and a bunch like a couple guys from like Famitsu, and yeah, just a bunch of like interesting games like Takfuji also, if you remember the guy who did like the Extreme speech from what was that E3 like 2009 or something. Anyway, that's an
Wow.
interesting fellow as well. But yeah, but like a bunch of like relatively. Oh yeah, Suda51 was there too. So I got to play like my silly little indie game up on stage with like these famous game developers, and there's like a professional fighting game player too from Chile called King Blue River, who's like a really cool guy. So I got to meet him too, and it was funny because one of the gimmicks of the game I made is that you can use basically any type of game controller to play it. It's supposed to be like a really simple, accessible game, and part of it's like even if you have a custom made controller because you have a disability, you can use it. But we also will bring just a bunch of like wacky controllers with us to conventions. So like we have a bunch of like just like regular retro ones like Super Nintendo and 64. We also have really strange things like we have like the Dreamcast fishing rod controller,
Huh.
and the professional fighting game guy was actually doing very well and beat all of us using the DK bongos. So this is a bizarre scene up at Bit Summit, on stage. It's not a huge convention. It's pretty big. It's like the biggest indie game convention in Japan. So that was definitely a really cool experience. And then like that plus, yeah, like doing a bunch of traveling and meeting a bunch of people was really cool. Recently, I think I shared in the Discord that I also went to this Mother 2 event, which was also really interesting. I think it's the 30th anniversary of Mother 2, and they had like several exhibitions, but there was like a main one and a couple like side ones. Um, but the highlights were definitely they had a whole bunch of the development materials, including because I like pixel art. They had a bunch of these old like basically like graph paper sprite sheets that showed like all the different like characters and enemies, and they also had a bunch of the like actual clay models that were used in a bunch of the like promotional material for it. And I think it was just used as like concept art for the game. And then yeah, a bunch of things and a lot of like scripts and like even some sheet music and stuff too. They had that was just behind glass on the wall. You could see like the actual development documents from Mother 2. That was like extremely cool. So I think one thing that's also great about being in Japan and maybe being in Tokyo in particular is that there's just all sorts of events that are happening all the time. Honestly, it's a little overwhelming sometimes because I do try to go to a lot of them, and I still go to a lot of indie game developer events too. So it's really it's always exciting and maybe a little bit tiring, but it's definitely inspiring as well, and it sort of makes me want to you know keep getting better at making games and keep meeting interesting people. And seems like I don't know, it's just a great place for that. You get a lot of like interesting foreign developers that come to Japan on vacation or end up moving here too. I know a couple people that have moved over since I have, so it seems like it's a really cool and growing community as well for indie game developers and people that work at game companies as well. So cool place. Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, that was the inspiration for the question is because when I saw you post those pictures of, the Earthbound event or Mother 2 event, I was like,
Mm.
"Man, that's incredible," just to see that, and I know you do a lot of the conventions, so, yeah, it seems like, Tokyo is, the place to be, obviously, in the industry, so,
Mm.
just fascinating that you're able to have those experiences. One last question about work,
Mm.
it sounds to me like that indie game, was your ticket as much as anything else. Do you find that developing a good indie game is essentially kind of resume that people should consider if they're looking to get into the industry?
Definitely helps a lot, I would say. And I will say also, like the game I made, Super Slime Marina, wasn't like crazy successful. I think it mostly was honestly useful because it allowed us to go to a bunch of different conventions and meet a bunch of people. So I also got like we were there used to be I think this it's kind of had a revival but kind of hasn't. There's a group that was called the Indie Mega Booth that would basically purchase a big section of a lot of conventions, mostly in America, and then sort of divvied up with a bunch of little indie games. So we showed at the Indie Mega Booth several times, I think 3 times total, and we went to like PAX East and PAX West, and we also went to GDC one time with Indie Mega Booth, and they also were ones that helped us get into Bit Summit. So I think definitely, yeah. Obviously, it helps if you have any kind of indie game that people are at least a little bit interested in. If you can show up places and get meet people, that generally will help a lot. I noticed that even for people that are doing like the Senmongako, sort of the trade school thing I mentioned before in Japan, usually you have like a capstone project, and a lot of those projects will be shown at smaller conventions here in Japan. And I think, yeah, particularly for people that are like quite young and like just graduating, that's usually a big part of their resume slash portfolio for applying to someplace like Grezzo. And I know for Grezzo, a lot of our new hires are from like specifically like a game development, like trade school, basically. So I think there's definitely a lot of uh, benefits to doing that. And yeah, obviously, if you make a really good, super successful indie game, you can just keep doing that and have lots of money, which would be nice. But if you make an okay indie game, that at least can bring you to some conventions, that can definitely help. And honestly, I think not just in Japan, but in general, game companies don't care so much about your like formal like educational qualifications. They care more about like your actual skills and the best way to show that is by showing something you've made. So definitely, if you want to work for a game company, the more decent game demos you can show them, I think the better. Um, so yeah, I definitely recommend that as a way to get into the industry if you're interested. But I will also say that it's I think even more so when I was doing it, there's a crazy amount of competition. Um, Especially in indie games field, like if you want to do it as like a business, it's very fraught with danger and risk. Uh, and in my case, we didn't really make that much money off the game either, but it did open other doors, and it was a good experience. I'm very glad I did it, but I also don't want to like say that, oh yeah, like just make an indie game and you'll make a bit of money and then you'll totally get hired by some game company. Like it still is a lot of work and I think a lot of luck too. Like I think in my case with randomly meeting that art director from Grezzo, uh kind of turned out to be probably a very influential part of me getting a job there. And it was kind of just random. So um but definitely like putting yourself out there and yeah, generally trying to make, connections with people is definitely going to help you a lot just in general, I think. And not just even for the helping part, you'll just meet interesting people that will inspire you and, you know, sometimes even yeah, just like applying to events too. Like one reason why that Super Slime Arena game sort of became big enough to turn into something you could show is because we kept finding like little events we could bring it to, and then we were like, oh, what can we get done like before this event? And that sort of inspired us and kept us sort of chugging along with the development as well. So I think anything that can inspire you to sort of finish games and finish demos and stuff too is also really good. Sorry for
Well,
no rambling now, but yeah.
no, I mean, I think it's great career advice. Like, I am not somebody that is in any kind of computer science field or game development field. So to me, just as kind of a layperson, I assume that, oh, well, you have to get a degree in, computer science or game design, and there was a very formalized process. But I think, what you're saying kind of makes sense. Show people what you can do, and even if you don't succeed on Steam and it's like you said, a lot of competition. It's a kind of resume. It's a networking vehicle, and I think that can be useful to people. I want to turn also just to like life over there. On our Discord, we're collectors and retro gamers, and we're a little bit obsessive. So I think, of course, Jay and I talk about this all the time. Importing and stuff like that. But game hunting in Tokyo, like what do you do it? And maybe without mentioning sort of specific stores, because we don't want you to reveal your sources, but just what would you tell somebody who's going over there as a game hunting tourist? What should they look for?
I gotcha. Well, I will say that Tokyo is probably not the best place to do it, which I think is kind of common knowledge now. But there's definitely still good things here, but usually the prices are quite high. So if you want like cheap stuff, definitely like get as far away from Tokyo as you can. The place I live is I still live in Tokyo, but I'm very very close to Chiba Prefecture, which is in like east of Tokyo. And
Okay.
so when I go retro game hunting, usually I go out into Chiba. There's a lot of like, I mean, people know about Hard Off as like a pretty big like chain store of used things in general, but they do have a lot of games. So I get stuff from that. Also like Yahoo Auctions is pretty good. It's basically like Japanese eBay. Sometimes you have to be patient because there's a lot of competition on there too, but you still can get some pretty good deals off of that. Uh, yeah, there's a when I lived in Kyoto, I went game hunting fairly often too, and there was a bunch of like little local places you could go to. But most of those too, yeah, they kind of got better the further away from the main city you went. So yeah, nowadays when I go out, usually to Chiba, I often am going out to some like weird little place. Like I take a train way out in the Chiba, and then I take like a bus, and then walk a bit to find some like retro game store or hard off or something. And I don't always find something good, but it's fun. It's honestly one thing I didn't mention before is that like when I moved from Kyoto to Tokyo, I actually ended up selling a whole bunch of my collection. I think I talked a little bit about that in the Discord before, and have kind of mixed feelings about it still, to be honest. Recently, I have been doing a bit more like hunting and collecting, but it's still like way down than it was before. But I guess having a really tiny apartment also helps constrain you a little bit. So I guess there's good and bad things about that too. But yeah, definitely recommend going a bit out into the countryside if you can, if you really want to find like good deals on game stuff. If you just want to find good things and you don't mind paying a little bit of money for it, though, there's lots of good places in Tokyo. So definitely, like if you're looking for like a really good souvenir or something you really really want. Like I know a lot of people, my friends that came over, were looking for like Mother 3 or some pristine copy of like Ocarina of Time or something. And you can still get stuff like that. It just, especially if you're in like Akihabara, it's going to cost you. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, Akihabara is just way, way too expensive. I mean, I think as a tourist, especially if you're traveling with someone, like, I couldn't and didn't want to, drag my wife into the boondocks to search for games. But I do think, I mean, the Tokyo area is so large. If you just get away from Akihabara and kind of the main places, you
Mm.
will find some stuff. I mean, I
Oh yeah.
I found I found some great deals. Kinda in the area where my wife works, which
Mm.
is not, near anything that a kind of a tourist would go to, and,
Gotcha.
so just and everything's accessible, with the train, so if you can take
Mm.
20, 30 minutes and go game hunting, you can also kind of do all of the other touristy stuff and have non-gaming experiences, which I highly recommend. Don't go over there just to shop.
Oh yeah,
Um
for sure.
it's kind of funny you talked about selling your collection when you moved from Kyoto to Tokyo. Did you have a collection back in the States? And if so, like, what did you do with it when you made this big life transition?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of funny. So I did have a pretty big collection before I moved to Japan, and I actually found out when I was moving that the one of the main shipping companies in Japan is like Yamato Transport, or like Kuroneko is what it's usually called because it has a black cat as its logo. But they actually have like a moving to Japan plan basically, and it was funny because I had, I think, 11 boxes of things, and I think like 7 of those boxes for like all my belongings that I was sending to Japan were games and like
Huh.
consoles. So I lived in Boston and then like the DC area before I moved to Japan. So I didn't have a lot of space in Boston or the DC area either. But I did have a pretty significant portion of like my rooms would be like retro gaming related. Um, which when I did move to Kyoto first, it was a bit overwhelming because yeah, just making it fit in my tiny apartment. I lived in like a company dorm thing before, was quite difficult. Um, but yeah, that basically what happened. Yeah, I got my stuff sent over, and then I did buy some more stuff while I was here, but not like a crazy amount because I still had a pretty big collection. And even though I'm sad I sold it, I did kind of sell it maybe in like the best possible way. Like there's a guy I know in Kyoto who is also a game developer for a very very long time. Like he used to make like games that he would distribute on like BBSs and stuff. And I think eventually he sold one of his games to a major game company and made a ton of money off of that. And I think he's used a lot of that money to make a extremely amazing both like a console game and like retro PC game collection. And he uses it also to sort of host events in Kyoto about like once a month. He has like a retro night where he'll bring out some stuff, and usually it's like a based around a theme. So I remember one time when I went, it was like all the different versions he had of like the first Castlevania game. So he had a whole bunch of like these old PC and like obscure versions, and he had a couple ones that were made by like more people like recently too, like I guess homebrew type stuff. But anyway, I sold the vast majority of my collection to him, where I know it will be cherished and used for good things. And he also gave me a very good rate. And I think part of the other reason why I did it was because I think finding a situation where you can find somebody who is willing to pay you like basically market rate for as much as you want to sell is extremely fortunate and rare. So I kind of took advantage of that too, and it really helped me out like for moving here. And I guess a lot of the I had like a lot of like bad stuff happening in the background at the same time, so I needed the money as well, and it really really helped me out. I'm glad that my friend was able to do that, and he has that my collection's in like a good place. So that's kind of my feelings on that.
Yeah, that sounds like an absolutely amazing situation because you're right. I mean, if you ever try to sell some of your collection, people are looking to lowball you, I think, and to sell it at the market rate is incredible. Um, Last question, and
Mm,
I've wondered this for a while. You know, I feel like in the States there's definitely kind of like a retro gaming bubble. You
mm,
know, you're in it, it's popular. I think especially after the pandemic, the prices exploded.
mm.
How would you compare the scene in both countries? I mean, is it a healthy collecting scene in Japan, or is it relatively niche?
I would say that probably overall it's relatively niche, but I also feel like the retro game bubble is like definitely affecting things in Japan as well. Partially because there's like, I think it's the most tourists that there have ever been in Japan now. So there's just lots and lots of people here, and a lot of them do want to buy some retro stuff, even if they're not like hardcore collectors. So definitely like just like the prices in Japan are also getting worse, although they're generally still better than the American or European versions of stuff. Um, but I also say that like a lot of the like Japanese friends I know that are also into retro collecting, there's not quite as many of them, and they definitely are not as like I guess like quite as obsessive in like at least not the same ways that like a lot of the Americans and European fans are. I don't know quite how to describe it, but yeah, there's definitely a difference there. I think also just like there's a decent amount of like Japanese retro game collectors that are also interested in like Western stuff. That's kind of like the inverse version of a lot of the retro game collectors in the States, which I guess makes sense, just being interested in foreign things. But I guess another thing that's kind of interesting is the like the Mega Drive was not very popular in Japan, but a lot of the like serious retro collector people I know that are Japanese here are like that's like their thing. They love the Mega Drive, like they collect all the cool Mega Drive games, and they also import Genesis stuff sometimes. So it's kind of interesting because I feel like in the states maybe the inverse is like the Genesis is more common and people like know about it, but they like it. But a lot of people are interested in importing like Super Famicom games. So not sure how much of that is different, but I have noticed at least among my like Japanese friends that are into retro collecting, a lot of them really like the Mega Drive. So
Yeah, I noticed that over there this summer. It seemed like the Mega Drive games were in pristine condition and extremely expensive relative to the other stuff
mm,
on the shelf.
yeah.
Which is interesting. Like the Mega Drive is one console. Now I have a Genesis collection, but sort of importing Mega Drive just never appealed to me because I don't know. I just Sega was always the Genesis anyway was always kind of like position 2 for me back in the day. But yeah, I mean whatever is rare, or wasn't too popular, I think becomes rare and then becomes the object of the collector's desire. But do you find that there's like YouTubers, like Japanese retro gaming YouTubers and influencers and stuff like that, or is that a uniquely American thing?
I'd say there definitely are some in Japan, but there's definitely more in America. And I think like the American perspective on retro games is also sort of influencing, maybe not so much Japan, but definitely influencing Europe and maybe a little bit of Japan as well. But I think the other thing that's interesting about Japan is they have like sort of like official things too. I guess I don't know if you could say it's official, but they have actual TV shows like Game Center CX obviously is a thing. And I noticed even just on like regular variety programs, they will just have stuff that comes out about people being nostalgic about like the Famicom and like other things and just like yeah, retrospectives on games. Um so I kind of feel like maybe in a way I feel like game appreciation and like retro game appreciation has kind of been sort of a more like background part of like American or a mainstream Japanese culture for a while too. Because I know there's also been like a lot of like anniversary concerts and stuff like video game music has I think been taken a lot more seriously in Japan for longer than it has been in like the West. So it's kind of interesting how different feelings about different consoles and like I guess different parts of retro games are slightly different versus like here versus the states. Yeah, not quite sure my point is in that, but I
No, I
have
mean
noticed some differences.
I think you're right. I mean, that Game Center CX has been going on for a while, and I don't think that there is an equivalent sort of mainstream cultural appreciation for games. Like, I can't think of any kind of mainstream media outlet in the States that has any kind of, or has had any kind of role in retro game appreciation. I mean, maybe you could say the G4 TV network, where they did a
Mhm,
couple of documentaries about I think the Turbo Graphics and the 90s arcade scene, but
mhm,
even that stuff is 20 years old, and I can't think of anything similar today.
mhm.
I mean, even if you go like through the magazine racks in a Japanese train station, right? They always have some magazine that's celebrating 30 years of Sega
Mhm.
Saturn, and uh, here we get, if you can find it, the British magazine Retro Gamer
Yeah, yeah.
that maybe, does a little retrospective every quarter, or of course in their main issues, they'll have articles on the ZX Spectrum, stuff like that. Doesn't really resonate with American gamers so much, but that's the only mainstream publication that I could think of. So
Yeah, you're right. I think in general, it's interesting that the magazine like industry as a whole is still maybe not doing like amazing, but definitely doing better in Japan versus maybe anywhere else. Like it's interesting. Like yeah, we obviously still have like Famitsu, but there's like at least like three or four other like weekly or monthly like Nintendo, just Nintendo magazines that exist, and obviously like manga is still really huge in like magazines too. So it's definitely interesting, like kind of being in a place that still has like a physical media like publishing industry doing well.
I'm a fan of those. I think one of them is like Nintendo Dream, I think
Yeah,
is.
yeah. Nintendo Dream is really good. Actually, I think the latest edition has a big like Echoes of Wisdom section in it. So I've actually been meaning to pick up a copy. I'll probably try to get that soon.
Yes, I'm going to be importing a copy of that. I uh I like Nintendo Dream. It just takes me back to getting the old Nintendo Powers
Yeah.
back in the day. So I also like New Type. Like I think you're right. I think the Japanese magazine industry still produces engaging magazines. Like even the paper and the art and the ink that they
Mm,
use to print it still holds up. Whereas if you get some magazines here, it's like printed on toilet paper. The colors are washed out. So I am a fan of that, the
yeah.
traditional media market.
Mm.
But yeah, I wanted to. I don't want to hold you for too long. I know it's a work night, and it's getting late over there. But we really appreciate that you did this interview. And I would say to people out there, hey, join our Discord. And Oscar is always sharing those experiences from Japan. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm very happy to talk, and hopefully it was interesting. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly. I don't do a lot of interviews, so but I definitely had a good time talking with you. And yeah, if you ever want me to come back on and just talk about some other subject besides me, that would also be good. I feel a little self conscious tonight.
Hey, we will definitely do that. We want to do it when both of us are available, and
Mm,
we'll definitely set that up.
sound good.
So yeah, I think we for an ad hoc episode, we definitely covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, I think we did. I think we did.
Yeah, I don't have anything for it came from Japan.
I do.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I do. All
So
right.
we so we'll end as we always do with it came from Japan.
It's kind of small. I only got 3 items. But I
Okay.
did pick up my Japanese import of Lollipop Chainsaw Repop.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That did come. I did not open it yet. Because I've beaten this game twice. Well, no, I've beaten this game a number of times on different consoles. Because I triple bought now Lollipop Chainsaw. I have it on PlayStation 3. I have it on Xbox 360. I was thinking about getting it on Switch, but I probably wouldn't play it. So I did get Repop on the Switch, which was really good. Nice addition to add. Next is I got another Super Deluxe game because I like giving LRG's imprint in Japan my money. I bought
Huh,
Contra Operation Galuga. I bought that.
okay.
I've heard really bad things about this game. I heard it wasn't great, but it's Contra. How often do you get to buy Contra in the modern day? So
That's true.
yeah, I was like, maybe everyone help. I mean, everyone else who says games that are really really bad, I end up enjoying. So I just bought it. Uh, the next thing that I got is Toho Damaku Kagura. That is kind of like a Toho. How do I explain this? It's a cutesy, cute 'em up, overhead kind of anime game. That's the best way I can put this. But the reason why I bought this is because it's a limited edition that's extremely heavy, and then I forgot that it came with like 12 soundtracks inside. And I love soundtracks. Like I love music. That's probably another thing that I like to do is buy soundtracks. So, yeah, those are the three things that I bought. I haven't opened any of these things yet because, I haven't had time. I'm being a dad.
Well, that is true. Yeah, you may not open those for a while. Yeah, I'm kind of like scrolling through like my imports. What did I get recently? It wasn't a lot, but I did get some books in, and basically what I wanted to do
Ooh.
is I wanted to get like all the magazines from June and July, which is when I was there to kind of commemorate my first trip to Japan. For whatever reason, I didn't buy like the Famitsu or the new type when I was there. Either I couldn't find it or, I was
Mm,
just busy. So I did buy like art books and game books and stuff like that, but I wanted to have like what was on the newsstand. So that's
okay.
not in and of itself so interesting, but among those packages, I got the Railfan Taiwan, which is one of the games that I've wanted, and that one is kind of interesting because unlike some of the other Railfan games, it's only one line, and it
Mm,
is the like a bullet train,
okay.
so it's essentially you going in a straight line, and that's it. Like, but whatever. It's a little trickier to hit the different speed sections and so I guess it has some different gameplay elements. But then the other thing I got was this book, and this is sometimes when you import, you get burned.
Yeah.
So I
Oh,
saw,
yeah.
yeah, so I saw this art book, and I could tell that it was Midgar, and I thought it was the art of Midgar from Final Fantasy VII
Fantasy
on.
7.
Yeah,
Yeah.
on the PlayStation 1, I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome," because I love the city, I love the designs, like, maybe it's gonna have concept art and all these screenshots, and then when I got it, it turned out to be the Midgar from, like, the Final Fantasy VII re-release.
Oh no.
So, which, I mean, I played that game, finished that game, I enjoyed my time in Midgar there, but it just wasn't the nostalgic
Yeah.
Midgar that I remember. So, yeah, it wasn't that expensive, but people who are getting into importing just know that unless you're fluent in Japanese, you're going to buy some things where you're kind of hoping it's something and then you get something else.
Yeah. That happens from time to time. You know what? I just remembered there is two other games that I did get that I think one of them we were supposed to talk about. Really quick, I did get Visions of Mana.
Oh, that's
I
right. Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I imported a PS4 version because the PS4 version is not released here in the States. So
Okay.
imported that, and I also got my hands on Shadow of the Ninja remake. That
Yes.
that game is fantastic. It is so good. I recommend everybody get Shadow of the Ninja remake. It is really really good. The overhaul designs of the game is so phenomenal. I loved every minute of it. It's really tough though. Really tough game. But I do recommend this game. It's so good.
And a little PSA for people out there. So you had talked about this game and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to get this immediately." And I googled Shadow of the Ninja. The first thing that came up was super rare games or super deluxe. I can't remember the
Uh-huh.
European.
Oh yeah,
So I
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, Oh man, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do this. So I put in my pre-order, and I know that I will either never get it or get it like 10 years from now. I'm still waiting on Parasol Stars, which I ordered 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And then I realized it is available on Amazon. Like
Yep.
there is a US version,
Had to
and
send you
it's
that link.
yeah, and it's obviously cheaper, and you'll get it the next day. So
Yep.
it's also on Steam. So if it's on a Steam sale, you may want to pick it up on there as well. So yeah, that was a good recommendation. Apparently, a lot of people talking very highly of that one.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, all right, my friend. It was fun, and we will be back later in the fall, or in closer to the holidays, and then you can tell us you got your one really special delivery, as we said, but you've got a lot of stuff coming in between now and December. So uh, our next episode will definitely cover a lot of that stuff, at least to say that you got it. Now, whether you'll be able to play it all,
Yeah, probably not.
that I'm not sure. But Shy's epic fall will continue.
Yep.
All right. Well, until then, keep importing.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.